this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Pro drivers live for race day, but for small business owners, every day is race day. That's why going pro with Lenovo Pro matters. One-on-one advice, IT solutions, and customized hardware powered by Intel Core Ultra processors keep your business on the right track. Business goes pro with Lenovo Pro. Sign up for free at lenovo.com/pro.
Lenovo.
There's a fire inside you can't ignore. Stand still? Not a chance. You're a lifelong learner who's come this far. Now, we're here to help you keep going further. Capella University. What can't you do? Visit capella.edu to learn more.
Well, the holidays have come and gone once again, but if you've forgotten to get that special someone in your life a gift, well, Mint Mobile is extending their holiday offer of half off unlimited wireless. So here's the idea. You get it now, you call it an early present for next year. What do you have to lose? Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Limited time 50% off regular price for new customers. Upfront payment required. $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan. Taxes and fees extra. Speeds may slow after 50 gigabytes per month when network is busy. See terms.
Hey everybody, Robert Evans here, and I wanted to let you know this is a compilation episode. So every episode of the week that just happened is here in one convenient and with somewhat less ads package for you to listen to in a long stretch if you want. If you've been listening to the episodes every day this week, there's going to be nothing new here for you, but you can make your own decisions. Welcome back to It Could Happen Here, a podcast that is being recorded far too early in the morning. With me to help me stay conscious is my friend and coffee entrepreneur, Prop, a.k.a. Jason Petty. Prop, how are you doing, buddy?
Man, I'm wonderful on this fine day. I almost did an AKA song forgetting which show I was. I was like, oh, wait, that's a Zeitgeist bit.
Happens to me all the time.
Yeah. I was like, which bit for which show am I supposed to do right now?
Here's what we were talking about before the show, which is that we're both exhausted despite sleeping normally this week. I feel like this may be something to do with these aliens everybody's talking about. Something's going on here.
It's, aliens or just this like kind of week-long sort of holiday festival I've been a part of that apparently all of Black America has been participating in. We're all experiencing a level of bliss I don't think we've had in a long time.
That is our subject of today, which is I think the term generally being used for it is the Montgomery Riverboat Brawl. That seems to be what we've all settled on. Yeah,
AKA the fade in the water. There's new spirituals and hymns we done written.
The Ballad of Black Aquaman.
Yes.
Love that kid. But before we get into all this, we should talk about what actually happened, because I'm going to guess there's at least a chunk of people listening who are like, what the fuck are you guys talking about? Yes. The short of it is, a couple of days ago, video dropped, 2 different clips, I think are mainly what people are watching, of a fight at a riverboat dock in Montgomery, Alabama. And basically what happens is, you had this riverboat, and it's, Montgomery, Alabama's got a lot of tourism. It's one of these big boats. It holds about 270 people, I think. Takes them up and down the river. You go up and down the river. You look at the pretty things. I assume there's beer or something. It's all sorts of cities do this. So this boat is heading back into dock, and they've got all these people who want to get off the boat because they've been on for a while, and they have
a line of people to get back in,
and a line of people to get back
to get on the next one. Yes.
Yeah. And they have a set spot that is their spot and no one else's to park their boat at the dock, as is usual for a large business like this. And some dudes with a pontoon boat have taken it up. They've parked there. So the captain gets on the PA for quite a while and is like, hey guys, move your pontoon. Hey guys, you got to get that pontoon out of here. Hey, y'all, if you don't get that pontoon out of here, I'm going to call the cops. And if you have open containers, the cops are going to fuck you. You don't want that, so why don't you just move? And these guys get, like, shitty at him. and start like yelling at him and cursing at him, flipping him the bird. So he sends over his co-captain, and the captain of the boat, from the videos I've seen, appears to be a white dude. The co-captain is a middle-aged black man. He gets off the boat and he goes over to just like move the pontoon boat, right? Which is a thing that boat people do when situations like this occur. This is not like an unheard of situation. And while he's doing it, a whole bunch of presumably the dudes who own this pontoon boat who are all white surround him and start attacking him. And then at one point, it looks like 5 or 6 people trying to, and he's for the record, he's holding his own. He's doing
for a while. He's holding his own.
For as long as you can. Yeah. And then a number of nearby people start running to his aid, including at least one of the kids on the riverboat hops out or like hops into the water and like swims across. Yeah, you want to talk about the rest of this? Yeah.
Yeah. There's a Hood Politics episode we recorded where I try to do like initial reactions and try to add some like color to this, which will come out a little later. This will come out before that. Mm-hmm. But so you're watching the video. You can't, it's all inaudible. So you can't really hear, except for the people recording, you hear them talking, right? But judging from, there's so many context clues to understand what's happening, right? So as the co-captain, the black dude's getting off the boat to come talk to these white boys, right? The way that you can just, when someone's like, and unfortunately for white people, y'all can't, when you're drunk, just your skin shows it. You know what I'm saying? Like, so you could just see, okay, this dude's like, your skin's very flush with color right now, so you're clearly drunk. You know what I'm saying? And it's hot as hell because it's Montgomery, Alabama, right? It's also Montgomery, Alabama. So you just from seeing the interaction and the body language of both people in this conversation, you're like, okay, this conversation is getting intense. And then once the white gentleman decides he's gonna put hands on this black dude, the black dude throws his hat up into the air.
He sure does.
Now, Robert, is that not a universal bat signal?
I would go so far as to say it's like that's damn near like a Mortal Kombat opener. Right?
Yes.
Like
it is universal. It is universal.
This man is about to throw hands.
Yes, it's like, all right, we about to throw hands, right?
Oh, it's so good. It's so good.
So at that point, that's when like clearly either these white boys are very inebriated or have grossly underestimated the feeling of collective identity black people have. Because when they decided to jump this man, you're in front of hundreds of black people. Who are all waiting in line to get on this boat, right? Who are already pissed at you because you're not moving, right? So when he does that, as you can see, there are people running, black men running as fast as they can to kind of help, this co-captain who by this point is being stomped because he's overpowered by 5 people. Yeah. And then you see this young man swimming. Yeah. to the shore, which is like that guy's a national treasure now. So
I don't know that guy, but I can tell that we can tell a couple of things about him. One of them is that he reacts quickly in a crisis. And the other is that pretty good swimmer. And he's in a lot better shape than most of us. Yeah.
He must be a teenager because how you gonna have the energy to swim there and then still start doing work?
Well, and then pull yourself up onto a dock when your clothing's all soaked. Very impressive feat.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so as that happens, people finally catch up. The boat finally gets a chance to dock. Now these other people who were on the boat and watched all this happen are like, now it's our turn. So they get off the boat, go to the pontoon, shirts off. Again, another universal signal. If I've taken my T-shirt off, we're here. We're gonna throw down. So they start throwing down. I mean, it's women getting involved, and then now it becomes this entire brawl, right? So, and if you've ever been in situations where brawls break out, they kind of move and shift as different people decide they want a part of it, and other people get tired, and somebody's finally, his nose bleeding, whatever. And while this is happening, there's a few clips where you can see whether there's security officers or police, they're kind of just watching. Yeah. Kind of like, I don't know if we need to do anything about this just yet. Now, finally, the brawl gets around the corner, and a brave old head, who sees his opportunity while who has brought
and
the internet.
He's got the soul of a sniper. This man is like
Yes, he
watching and waiting to act.
Yes. So at this point, there are some security officers involved who have finally been like, all right, man, maybe we should stop this. And it's almost like, again, you can't hear it, but judging by their body language, the cops are kind of like, I don't know, man, them white boys kind of asked for it. Like, and you know what I'm saying? So they're just kind of watching like, hey, man, you asked for it, man, and this is what happened. You should have moved your boat. Shouldn't have been talking shit.
Should have moved your boat.
Like Cat Williams says, shouldn't have been talking shit.
Yeah.
You know? So anyway, they do this, and this hero of a man grabs a white folding chair and just whacks a dude over the head with it who was attempting to attack some other people. Now, clearly, again, if you've been in a brawl, I may be adding color that's not on the video, but like if you've been in a brawl, you understand at some point you kind of black out and you just get punch drunk. So while he's hitting a guy with a folding chair, there's this other white lady who's attempting to intervene with an interaction that one of the security or cop guys is having with probably one of her compadres.
And this is, by the way, a mixed gender brawl. There's
yes.
This is not just dudes throwing hands previously to this point.
Yeah.
So.
It's girls on girls, it's girls on dudes, it's dudes on girls. It's a brawl, you know? So the officer, like officers do when you try to intervene with them having interactions with somebody, pushes the lady away. Now the lady's in Riverboat Crocs, right? So her feet just fall right through the Crocs, right? She gets pushed down and just happens to be in the eyesight of this 60-year-old man with a folded chair. And while she's down, he just turns and just whacks her over the head with this chair.
Oh, he sure does. He does. He gives her the WWE special.
I mean, just New World Order, suck it, just smacks her with a folding chair. And at that point, it's almost like, and again, it's all inaudible, but you just see the officers go like, shit, man.
Yeah, now we got to do something.
Now we got like, fuck, man. Now we got to arrest you, dude.
Yeah.
Right? So the cops finally go like, what the fuck, man? They take the chair from the guy. And the dude, his body language is so like he doesn't even know what's happening. Like, I'm just swinging, you know? So when the officer finally takes the chair and they're like, dude, you hit the lady. You hit the lady. With the chair, man.
We got to do something here.
We got to arrest you now.
Yeah.
Right. And which, of course, the internet watching it, and even the person shooting the video, we all like, oh yeah, nah, he's going to jail.
Yeah, like, he's definitely going to jail.
That guy going to jail. Everybody else, y'all might be fine. He going to jail. Yeah. And that's pretty much where the video stops.
Yeah. So it has obviously gone everywhere since then. There's a lot of writing about why this has taken off so much and been seen as so inspirational to people. I think it's because it seems we've all seen too many videos that are just kind of the first part of this, where there's a bunch of racist white people. And by the way, there's at least, you can't hear it on the video, but people have said that these folks, when that co-captain came down, were shouting the N-word at him and stuff.
Yeah.
So we've all seen the variants of this that are just some black man or black woman getting abused by a bunch of racists.
Yeah.
And this one starts looking like that and then turns into a beautiful comeuppance. These people picked a fight against a man they thought was alone and kind of heavy set and older and that they could wail on, and just wound up getting absolutely housed.
Housed.
Based on at least what I'm looking at here, it looks like 3 of the white folks involved in this have been charged with crimes. The police are talking to the chair guy.
Yeah.
It's unclear yet, like what exactly charges he's gonna catch.
He was on a radio show, a morning show in Alabama, where with just sort of a internet personality that like in the Black community we're all very familiar of, and so they asked him, like the lady asked him, like, okay, you had the chair, and the lady was already down, like what happened? And he said, it feels like we wrote this script where he goes, man, I blacked out. And then he said, I just thought about Rosa Parks and that lady that wouldn't give the seat to her. I was like, I'll give her a chair. Like,
fights are ugly things, but also in some ways beautiful things. There's a lot going on in this video. I'm not surprised that it's been taken by so many people. There's some lessons I think bystanders can take from this. From one thing, if like 50 people are having a giant brawl, might want to get out of there.
Just leave.
Yeah, just bounce.
You should know to leave. Yeah.
Not a good thing to get in the middle of. Second, if you're parked in someone else's boat spot, maybe instead of shouting racial slurs, get your fucking boat moved.
It's not. It was like, I think what it speaks to so much because this was such an avoidable situation.
Yes.
Like, it's just completely avoidable, bro. Just slide over a little bit. I feel like if you've driven a car on a highway, then you've seen a semi truck. Mm-hmm. And when the semi truck come, just get out his way. Like, why is you picking this fight, man? He can't. It's a big old 18-wheeler. It's just courtesy. So I'm just saying, like, that's a bigger boat than you. You're more nimble. You can move. And clearly it's a line of people waiting to get on. I just don't understand.
Yeah. No, that's one of the things I think that's involved here that's interesting to me, is that there's this, this is not just, I mean, like, obviously the fact that these guys were bigots is a factor here, but there's also just this increasingly common freedom that the most selfish people in our society feel to be like aggressive about the fact that they don't owe anyone else like basic like politeness, right? Like the very basic, 270 people are being inconvenienced because I parked my shit in the wrong space. I should bounce, I should and probably at least say, oh, sorry, I fucked up.
Oh,
but
my
instead,
bad.
like, no, we're going to make this a thing because like we get to park wherever the fuck we want and fuck you. Like that kind of attitude is like, it's so frustrating. Like, I can't even get myself into the head of someone who would do what these guys did and not like feel like they were an asshole. Like, I've had to do the thing every now and then. I think most of us do, where like I park my car in like a red zone or something because it's like it's like there's no spaces. I'm 30 seconds, right?
Yeah,
and you get out and someone's seen you like in the fucking red, and they're like, and yes, like, I know it's not good. Everyone does it at one point, man. I'm sorry.
Dude, I'm so sorry, bro. I'm so sorry. Look, I'm gone. My bad. Yeah, totally.
And to have the fucking chutzpah to just like look at a boat of 270 people and be like, fuck all of you. Like, I want to keep my stupid ass pontoon here for some reason.
Yeah, and then the willingness to be like, what the fuck are you gonna do about it? Well, we'll jump you if you get that mad. And whether you're adding to either the lack of like situational awareness or just that overall chutzpah, like you said, of just like, whatever, I'll take all of you. Like, you really? Like, yeah. I think that there's a lot to color here too with the fact that, first of all, this is where it's taking place. I mean, we're still in Montgomery, Alabama here, and on a dock that was obviously and verifiably a dock where slaves were dropped off at. You know what I'm saying? So you have that history, right? You have the history of the Montgomery bus boycotts. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is the city where Rosa Parks did the thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is where it happened. So there's so much history in the city. And on top of that, like, I mean, there's high schools in Alabama named Robert E. Lee, like Robert E. Lee High School. Like, we're talking about a place that I mean, it was in the news in the aughts that like, I mean, there was a high school that just desegregated, like in the year 20 something. Like
hey, they got there.
Yeah. They just desegregated a high school, right? It made the news in 2010 because they finally had a desegregated prom. But that was just the prom. And it's just that the prom, white school invited the black. They can't go to school together. They could just do a dance. With this is the state that this happened in. So you're in this like, and I hate to like otherize them, but I'm gonna otherize them in the sense that this is some like multiverse bizarro world where where desegregation is recent. You know what I'm saying? So when you have that type of thing, first of all, you have to remember like both of those things are sitting in sort of the collective consciousness of that community, especially for the black people who are like, this the world we live in, but we've also proven that if you push us far enough, you know what I'm saying? Like, we're not going to stand for it. You know what I mean?
We'll pick up a folding chair.
We'll pick up a folding chair.
Which has become something of a symbol in the last
It's the new open
week.
Carry. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I saw at least one TikTok video that was just it was like there's like a couple of people watching as this young black guy in a Walmart like was holding up and like testing it like the way that you would like a gun at the gun store. He's like, yeah.
Man, the memes have been glorious. I've seen folding chair earrings. I've seen but the one is this. I sent Robert a video of the folding chair getting interviewed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's one of the first of all, that's one of the funniest accounts you could ever follow. But he was just like, man, you know, I was just sitting there and then we started doing charity work.
And which account is that?
Oh yeah, Ace Vance. ACEVANCE. He does just the most incredible voiceovers.
Yeah.
But the chair was just like, we was handing out charities. I was doing charity work. I was
it's glorious.
Freely giving ass whoopings. Like, have a seat. You might step up, have a seat. Anyway, it's so good. But I think that like is important. I think another thing that I think is interesting specifically for like the It Can Happen Here audience, which one thing I love about the show is like y'all give so much historical context to whatever we're looking at. You know what I'm saying? As almost like proof of concept that not only can it happen here, it is happening here. You know what I'm saying? And I think for this one, there was this interesting moment. There's another good follow for you guys. This guy named Conscious Lee. So his name is the Conscious Lee. He was a like world-renowned like debater, a master debater. I'm just kidding. But he was a world-renowned debater. He was one of the first, like him and his partner was like the first black like co-champions in like professional or college level debate. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so he's a brilliant thinker. He's like, you know, YouTuber of the year, Styles, whatever, right? Anyway, content creator. Anyway, he brought up this point among sort of the black community that what came out of this too was this hashtag of like, yo, we are not our ancestors. Mm-hmm. You know, which, as I understand the sentiment, it also shows sort of a lack of historical knowledge of like really how our ancestors handled slavery. Like,
yeah, like of the amount of resistance that
the
was
amount
present.
of resistance we actually had. You know what I'm saying? And even just like, I would even encourage just like a simple Google search of the amount of rebellions, you know, you just, whether you're talking about the famous ones like the Haitian Rebellion, which we did a Bastards pod about, you know what I'm saying? Where like these fools threw off their oppressors. You have
where you got Nat Turner.
Nat Turner, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Which I talk about more on Hood Politics, but like my 7th grade like historical figure report was on Nat Turner. Mm-hmm. And I was bused to like a suburban like middle school for a little bit. So I'm walking into the suburban middle school with my Nat Turner paper. My poor English teacher, she had been thinking, I don't know what she was thinking, but anyway, Yeah, you know what I'm saying? You have like there were one in New York, there was the one during the 13 colonies. Like, we have such a history of like rebellion and resistance. Like, not to mention slave ships that were overtaken, you know what I'm saying, by their captors. Like, you know what I'm saying? So like these things there is a rich history of us rebelling. So like it's almost a point of lesson, a point of learning for the Black community too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's like a really useful, teachable moment while everyone's kind of amped up about this thing to talk about. I've heard it described as like left-handed power, kind of in some books that would talk about not just, you know, what we've been chatting about, which are these kind of big moments of insurrection among enslaved people, but like the everyday acts of resistance by people who were enslaved, like while they are, you know, on the plantation stuff, different ways of like pulling autonomy, of like, you know, teaching their kids how to read, or, you know, getting things like money or extra resources, you know, out of the people who are attempting to own them, like methods of escape and resistance, you know, all these methods of like preserving traditional art and religion while, you know, in chains, like all that kind of stuff is also I hope it like spurs some of that, you know, the folding chair can be added to a rich history of resistance.
Yes. And I'm also curious around, like, obviously you and I on that are currently being recorded, plus a lot of the community that both of us represent, like, we're not pacifists.
Mm-mm.
Like,
no.
at all. You know what I'm saying? And I find that discourse to be interesting too, and especially around, you know, if you're and I'm like, you know, neither is the broader racist community. Like, y'all not pacifists either. Like, you asked for the smoke, you got the smoke.
Yeah.
Like, what is more American than this?
It's, I think, a more optimistic chapter, especially like as we head into 2024, as we deal with like kind of these continuing efforts to disenfranchise particularly Black voters across large chunks of the South. I'm glad that we've got this what will hopefully continue to be a powerful image for people to kind of rally behind. This is a nice thing to have. It's I don't know, and it's interesting, like, things are said in a video like this that is just kind of like chaotic brawling, but it speaks to people in a way that, you know, a history textbook maybe isn't going to reach them, because there's just something so kinetic and powerful about like watching a large group of people realize that an injustice is going down, and then be like, well, I guess we've got to throw hands to stop this shit. It's a microcosm of like a century and a half or so or a couple of centuries of history.
Whether it's absolutely the couple centuries of history, and then you're like at least 10 years of witnessing, you know, Black bodies being brutalized when no one was there to help. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, just seeing a video and like, oh, just watching a fucking terrible thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And then seeing no recourse. Like, okay, well there's never, I mean, are we going to wait for the justice system? You know, the best thing we've gotten so far is like, no knock warrants. I mean, thanks. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, at a state, you know, like, so, and a lot of promises of police reform, you know what I'm saying? So you don't, I mean, like, during Trump's presidency, there was an uptick in lynching. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, these fools are getting old school, you know? So it is, without hearing any video, without knowing anything that those men were actually saying, whether they were just run-of-the-mill pricks or just racist pricks, whatever it was, it is again, if you're a Black person in Alabama, it is completely reasonable to believe that if we wasn't there to help, that man would have been on the bottom of that river.
Yeah.
That man would have been strung up in a tree in the woods and we'd have never seen him again.
Yeah. I mean, just the sheer like rapidity with which he was surrounded and put on the ground by a large number of men did not suggest that the additional dudes who had arrived to wail on him were in a mood to like de-escalate the situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's like, I mean, I feel like that's like a reality that, it's almost like for the rest of the country, it's like this, if you like, this is the reality we need you to understand. When we say, I could die, you know what I'm saying? Like when you talk about, racism is not a thing. It's just some people are stupid. There's fucking bigots everywhere. Like, no, when we say it's life or death, like that's what you're witnessing. Like he could have died that moment. You know what I'm saying? And I think whether it's front of mind or back of mind, that is something that as a person of color, like you just kind of know that like this, if it would have just been a fight, you know what I'm saying? Then I think if it was just been a brawl, like most people would have just stayed out of it. Like if them two if they just were scrapping.
Two guys swinging on each other. That's usually the smart play if it's just two guys swinging on each other.
Then
right?
you take your phone out and you watch. You're just like, all right, man, hey, get your licks in. You know, you cheer for your boy, but like, I'm going to jump. Yeah. But when somebody jumps in, it's like, okay, I'm going to help the homie. But if you jump in helping the homie in Montgomery, Alabama, then it's like, all right, he might die. So we going it's different. Yeah.
Anything else to get to on this?
Man, I think I think one more thing I think to add color to this, and I might be like aggrandizing, but I think it's also important because what I'm really interested in is just the collective cathartic sort of feeling this has had is because there's so much built up tension. You have to talk about the Florida of it all. You know what I'm saying? And being aware of the idea that like you're right in front of our face, like you're trying to erase history. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, and I just 5 minutes ago watched that PragerU video for kids about about Christopher Columbus and slavery, and it was just like, well, you know, and this is approved content for children. Like, well, you know, at least we didn't kill him.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And like, well, you know, in Europe, we draw the line at like cannibalism, and these people that we're enslaving, like they practice it, you know? So I guess it's kind of, you know, maybe slavery's not bad. And slavery, I mean, it's all over the world. They've always had slavery.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So like
they learned useful skills. Yeah.
Well, I mean, okay, so
Florida's
there was no skills in Africa. Like, so you're trying to tell me this civilization that is the bedrock of civilization where all of humanity come from. You know what I'm saying? We ain't know how to do nothing.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah,
well, it's also like,
yeah.
I don't know. Like if you're, it's so frustrating because it's what you could. I think they're trying to like draw a line between, I don't know, the way slavery was often practiced in like the Mediterranean, where there was a lot of manumission. People were often freed, and when they were freed, there was not like ongoing stigma against having been a former slave, with like a racial slavery system in the Americas that was completely different, where manumission very rarely happened, and when it did, you were still subject to heinous restrictions on your personal liberty. Like it's just not a comparison.
Trying to use the lack of awareness of just even the term slavery and what you mean by that. You know what I'm saying? Using it to your advantage. It's like, well, anyone, you know, who's read a book or two can be like, what you did was different. You know what I'm saying? And you know it. You know it's different. You know what I'm saying? Like serfdom, you know, involuntary servitude, debt slavery. If there was ever two tribes and a tribe got raided by another one, there was slavery. Like I know like that it exists since the dawn of time. Not what you talking about though. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And you know it, you know. So you're playing on that. So I just think like collectively us just like keep hearing this shit and keep having to like, you know, keep your cool and try to fight it in the ballots and just the mind fuck of like, these folks, y'all really, you're gonna vote for a dude that's out on bail, that's a felon. Like this nigga's facing 70 years and y'all really trying to put this man in office again. Like just, it's such a mind fuck that you're like, man, I just need to hit a white lady with a chair. Like I'm just gonna hit a white lady with a chair.
Yeah.
And we, you know, something I've brought up many times on Hood Politics is understanding sort of like the collective sort of Black American psyche is we just process trauma through humor. Like when we make a joke out of everything, and it's really so we're just not like pushing random white people into moving traffic, you know, just because if not, you'd be like, what's his name? James Baldwin says that. He was like, to be Black in America is to, I'm butchering the quote, but to be constantly under the surface at a rage level that you're constantly trying to push down. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like the humor, why we got so many jokes about like, nah, chair homie going to jail. Like, here go your bail money. But that shit was amazing because like you just, good job. You know what I'm saying? And Aquaman coming out the water. Like why we make jokes about it is like, well, yeah, I mean, it's funny. And if not, we'd be enraged all the time.
Mm-hmm. Well, prop.
Hey, man.
Yeah. I do feel like this is a good lead-in for the fact that we are actively preparing to do our Robert E. Lee episodes, which have taken a lot of reading, but I think you're gonna enjoy.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
Because again, I just like I'm already locking and loading the jokes. Like I can't wait.
Yeah, he's such a baby. I think like that was the thing that surprised me. Like I expected like, okay, well this guy's, you know, a bad person for obvious reasons, being the military leader of the Confederacy, but like the degree to which this dude is a fucking baby is right. Yeah, we're gonna have a good time with this one.
I also I also as a thought experiment, my question would be, okay, Robert Evans, if you were in Montgomery at that moment, how would you handle that?
I mean, if I see a bunch of people wailing on a single dude, even outside of a situation where it's clearly racist, I'm going to try to stop that because I don't want to watch someone get beaten to death in the street. Yeah. Like, unless they have it coming. I don't know. If it's like a guy with a swastika armband and people are kicking him on the ground, I might not intervene. Yeah. I don't know. In that case, I might just to try to stop people from catching a fucking murder charge. But like, I feel like now at the point at which there's like 60 people fighting on the dock, I don't know that I'm running into that. Like for one thing, it seems like enough people are there. Yeah. But yeah, you see a bunch of people like kicking the shit out of a man trying to do his job. You should try to intervene. Yeah. Like those fucking security should have gotten in there faster. Yeah. But like, yes, I would hope that I would run in at that point and attempt to stop what was happening. Yeah. Absolutely.
That's good, man. And
I don't think I would have had the presence of mind to pick up that chair, though.
The chair is, no. I would hope that, like, it would be, I just wonder, like, because again, once you black out and get punch drunk, it's like, I would hope that, like, that the black people around would have the wherewithal to be like, no, he's with us.
Well, we'll see. Yeah,
that dude's with us. No, he's with us. He's good.
I think that's part of why you don't roll in when there's like 60 people fighting. But also at that point, it's hard to tell how do you help. And if you've got like 5 people beating a man on the ground, it's easy to know how to help. You try to get that guy up and away from them. You try to get them off of him. If you've got what are effectively like 2 or 3 dozen fights going on a dock.
Yeah.
It's like, well, do you just like start throwing hands? Like,
Yeah. Just punch someone.
Yeah.
Everybody punch somebody. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like, you just grab, like, find children and just kind of like, let me just move y'all out the way. Y'all back up.
Yeah,
back up,
yeah,
back up.
yeah. You should. I think anytime you're encountering a situation like this, like your first is like, what can I do that will help? Again, it's easy if there's a guy getting beaten or if there's someone seriously injured that needs medical care. If it's at a point where it's like, well, this is just fucking chaos, then maybe you just watch.
Yeah.
Keep an eye out.
Get a higher vantage point. Just make sure you can watch where it's going. You don't want to get sucked in. Because you might get trampled. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Keep your fucking don't fall into your phone because shit like that spreads.
Yes.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah.
Well, that's a usable piece of information.
Yeah.
For this otherwise just jokes full podcast. Yep.
Yeah. Well, we all had a good time today. Prop, where can the people find you if they would like to do that?
Man, please. I am on the same network you are. I'm on the Hood Politics Pod. My socials are they're all prop hip hop. Like you said, I am a coffee business owner. It's Terraform Cold Brew. You could use promo code HOOD and get 15% off your cold brew needs. Please help me sell. Please buy this coffee. Good Lord. I sunk a lot of money into this shit. Please buy the coffee. But yeah, man, prop hip hop and Hood Politics Pod. I'm on the network, man, and please check out the show.
Yeah. Check out Hood Politics. Check out Prop's Delightful Coffee. And yeah, you can find us right here tomorrow, unless it's a weekend, in which case you can find us here when the weekend ends, the next weekday. We're here every weekday. We never stop.
Pro drivers live for race day, but for small business owners, every day is race day. That's why going pro with Lenovo Pro matters. One-on-one advice, IT solutions, and customized hardware powered by Intel Core Ultra processors keep your business on the right track. Business goes pro with Lenovo Pro. Sign up for free at lenovo.com/pro.
Lenovo.
Support for the show comes from Public, the investing platform for those who take it seriously. On Public, you can build a multi-asset portfolio of stocks, bonds, options, crypto, and now generated assets, which allow you to turn any idea into an investable index with AI. It all starts with your prompt. From renewable energy companies with high free cash flow to semiconductor suppliers growing revenue over 20% year over year, you can literally type any prompt and put the AI to work. It screens thousands of stocks, builds a one-of-a-kind index, and lets you backtest it against the S&P 500. Then you can invest in a few clicks. Generated assets are like ETFs with infinite possibilities, completely customizable and based on your thesis, not someone else's. Go to public.com/podcast and earn an uncapped 1% bonus when you transfer your portfolio. That's public.com/podcast. Paid for by Public Investing. Brokerage services by Open to the Public Investing Inc. Member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services by Public Advisors LLC, SEC registered advisor. Generated assets is an interactive analysis tool. Output is for informational purposes only and is not an investment recommendation or advice. Complete disclosures available at public.com/disclosures.
Sink into affordable luxury. Anabay is the only machine washable sofa, inside and out. With stain-resistant slip covers and a cloud-like frame duvet, everything goes right in the wash. Plus, the modular design lets you change the look of your space anytime. Visit WashableSofas.com to upgrade your home. Shop up to 60% off site-wide, with sofas starting at just $699 and a 30-day money-back guarantee. Shop now at WashableSofas.com. Offers are subject to change, and certain restrictions may apply.
It Could Happen Here, a podcast about frustrating people and frustrating times. That's not all it's about. Sometimes we talk about nice things like raising sheep or unionization efforts, the endless struggle of working people to better the world. But not today. Today we're having a real piece of shit episode about a real piece of shit, and it's going to make everybody unhappy. Hello, Garrison. Hello, James. How are you both doing today?
So much better for hearing that, Robert.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, just ready to have a fine evening here, learning about something that's probably very fun.
Yeah,
Garrison,
it's gonna be good.
You don't have your Soda Stream. Disappointed in you.
Yeah, James and I are now Soda Stream pilled.
I've not gotten the company Soda Stream yet. That hasn't.
It's a generational thing.
Yeah. No. The unfortunately, the company beverage is Billy beer. Billy Carter, Jimmy Carter's brother's beer that was on sale for roughly a year in the 1970s.
Is it made of peanuts?
If only. No. So today, let's start. I got a question for you. Have either of you seen the Barbie movie?
Yes, I have.
How was it, Jim?
Well done,
Gare.
Oh, I didn't go, buddy. Just saw Gare.
Yeah. The set dressing was nice. It was a great lesson in like liberal recuperation. I'm sure it'll be great for like kids who like don't know what don't know what feminism is. But yeah.
Yeah, it seems I have not watched it either. It doesn't seem like my kind of movie. But it seems broadly accurate. Correct me if I'm wrong here. That it has what you might call like very, very modest and fairly mainstream, approachable feminist messaging.
Yes.
Yeah. That seems like it's fair, which most people would not be particularly angry about. But a sizable chunk of the very online right, the chunk of the right particularly that makes their living by having takes on shit, has been up in arms ever since it came out, and particularly ever since it made more than $1 billion in the box office. I'm sure a lot of people are aware that our old friend Ben Shapiro filmed a 42-minute video tearing it apart. In his signature preteen stolen valor voice.
So
stealing the valor of a prepubescent boy.
After I watched the movie, me and some friends tried to watch the Ben Shapiro video for fun. We made it like 6 minutes in, and then everyone forced me to stop.
Intolerable shit.
Cowards.
Yeah, they are
friends.
Cowards, but that's So elsewhere in the right, and kind of the less mainstream acceptable chunks of what we'd call the insurgent right around here, various thought leaders attempted to declare the movie stealth conservative propaganda as a way of insisting that its success was really due to it being anti-woke. That's silly too. None of this is worth discussing in detail. I promise you all, this is not going to be a podcast about the fucking Barbie movie. None of this is worth discussing in detail, save to say that Shapiro's anger at the movie, and particularly its comic relief character Ken, seems to have been the more widespread response from those kinds of people. Now, because I have made over the years a lot of poor decisions in my browsing and engaging habits over the years, Twitter sends me a lot of weirdo right-wing responses to everything that happens in the world, including this movie. And one of these posts that I caught somewhere in late July, around the 22nd, 23rd, caught my eye. Now, this post features a vaporwave filtered Ken photoshopped in front of a burning Viking longhouse, accompanied by the text, "Exit the longhouse." Now, when you see something like this and you don't know what they're getting at, like you have two choices. If you've got like, I don't know, kids, a really demanding job, anything at all going on in your personal life, you scroll right past it. If you're me, you spend like 4.5 hours reading various like fascist essays about feminism to try to figure out what the fuck a longhouse has to do with the Barbie movie. Now, the guy who had made this post is a low-level fascist political columnist named Lomez. He's kind of on the he's a little bit of volapilled. He's not like a very major figure. He's kind of several steps below anyone you've heard of. I would say like 2 or 3 steps, standard deviations of fame below like Jack Posobiec. But his writing has a degree of purchase among the kinds of conservatives who trick Ron DeSantis into running incomprehensible campaign ads with Sonnenrads in them. He's got a little bit of influence among that kind of crew, and he's sort of in the conversation with a lot of those people. I took notice of his post because I'd seen the term longhouse being used by a couple of these guys off and on. And because Lomez's post got like 3,000 something likes, which meant that, there's some community out there that gets what he's talking about. So on a whim, I clicked to view the quote tweets for this post, and I found a post by a user named Siege, which is, of course, a reference to a book about carrying out acts of terrorism in order to bring about a white ethno-state. The post says, Ken is you. He is an exaggerated Western man in the 21st century, anxious, confused, chasing women who don't care about him. He exits the longhouse and discovers his own will to power. Like you, he decides to bring this knowledge back to his fellow man. And it's, I'll show you guys this post here. It's pretty
Nazi, yeah.
Pretty Nazi.
It's not the best work on Ken. Like he looks like a blob.
No, I will say I have a little bit of respect for the craft here that he didn't just go to an AI. That looks like somebody like crudely cut a picture of Ken that they had like color inverted and then photoshopped it into a picture of a longhouse with a fire behind it. It's too crude a Photoshop for AI.
I will say, Siege's description of Ken from the Barbie movie is pretty accurate to what's in the film.
Mm-hmm. That's good. So, what is the Longhouse? What the fuck does a Longhouse have to do with what are otherwise pretty standard neo-Nazi-esque messaging about, the decadence and failure of modern man and all that kind of shit? And is this dumb fascist meme something that you need to care about? Now, unfortunately, the answer to that is yes, because all of this ties back to one extremely influential insurgent right-wing ideologue whose followers have been close to the presidency once before and may yet find themselves there again. That asshole is an MIT graduate named Costin Alamariu, who posts online under variations of the name Bronze Age Pervert. You guys, how aware are you of Bronze Age Pervert, or BAP, as he's often known?
So I've heard of BAP, but maybe only in passing, because I wasn't familiar with Bronze Age Pervert. Thank God. And thank you so much for sharing it with me today, Robert.
Oh, you're going to be so much less happy. Garrison, are you familiar with this fella?
I think I may have only seen stuff from him in passing. I'm not overly familiar now.
Yeah, that was kind of my experience until like a month or so ago when I started really digging into the guy. And I don't feel better as a result of having done that. But we know that this guy's actual name is Costin Alamariu because of a very recent Atlantic article. It was like a month ago that this guy got revealed in this article because this writer for the Atlantic was a friend of his, like at MIT. Like it was just somebody who and recognized his voice on a podcast. Now, this article, I find it frustrating for a number of reasons. I don't think it's great analysis of BAP's work or what people find appealing in it, or a particularly honest intellectual look at what this guy has to say. But it does have some interesting reveals, including the fact that Bronze Age Pervert's first public media appearance was a parody audio tour for an exhibition at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, written by B.J. Novak, who played Ryan in The Office.
Yeah.
So that's odd. And it's one of those. BJ Novak is not a stealth Nazi, don't worry. But the video or the thing that they put together does kind of fit for like a fascist art project. And I'm gonna read how the Atlantic describes this audio tour they put together or they assembled together. Novak had recruited a Romanian classmate with a deep voice, and together they'd recorded an audio tour for the exhibition Tales from the Land of Dragons, 1,000 Years of Chinese Painting. With the help of friends, they then slipped cassettes containing their tour into the museum's official audio guides. Art lovers must have wondered about the thick Eastern European accent that greeted them over the twang of a Chinese string instrument. The Romanian soon became opinionated. Personally, he said, I think this painting is a piece of crap. Then deranged, he alluded to his disgusting anatomical abnormalities. He called his listeners decadent imperialist maggots and confessed a desire to smash a glass case with a sledgehammer and rip a scroll to shreds with my teeth, which, by the way, are extremely long and sharp, more like fangs than human teeth. At last, he offered an interlude of idiot music while he fumbled with his script. This should keep you occupied, you drooling imbecile, he bellowed at the listeners, by now either amused or complaining to management. So there's little whiffs of degenerate art stuff in there, but it's also just kind of like a little bit of like Max Headroomy kind of stuff, like where you're kind of tricking people into consuming this like parody artwork thing. Like, again, I think this was a pretty innocent joke on Novak's part, but Costin, number one, probably got picked for this because he's got a thick Romanian accent that he very much plays up. He was noted in this time as kind of talking like Dracula deliberately. He also would always wear these like long and elaborate black coats so that he kind of looked like a Dracula type figure. Like he was, you know, he was doing a bit. He was putting on like a that was the image he wanted to portray himself as to people, this kind of like mysterious and Eastern European sort of figure. Now, Kostin first started posting as Bronze Age pervert on a series of obscure web forums in 2010. In the November of 2013, he joined Twitter and immediately fell in with a loose community that some people call Frog Twitter. And these are, you know who these guys are. It's like a general term for anonymous alt-right adjacent posters with like Pepe avatars. Yeah. And the other group, the kind of related people that he fell in with and that he started to have traction with are adherents to a fascist philosopher known as Curtis Yarvin or Mencius Moldbug. Curtis is his real name. Mencius Moldbug is the pseudonym he wrote under. Now, I know it's these people
why
are very
do they always
frustrating.
do this shit, man? It's just so pathetic. Play Dungeons and Dragons. Just
a solid 20% of our fascist problems are like people didn't get a reliable D&D group early enough. Like a lot of these, I think Baldur's Gate 3 is going to save us from a lot of these guys in the future.
It is the Antifa computer game.
Yeah. So Curtis Yarvin, a.k.a. Mencius, is a UC Berkeley graduate in computer science who joined the tech industry and got pilled on a strain of anti-democratic libertarian theory.
This is the pathway, man.
Yeah.
This is perfect.
Well, Bronze Age pervert also goes into tech after graduating from MIT, right? Yeah. And like, you know, a decent number of these guys come out of like Stanford and shit. Like it's all these guys who are in fact to some extent like intellectual elites. Bronze Age pervert's dad is a teacher at MIT. Like just kind of like you look at like Stephen Miller's background, right? A lot of these guys come out of like liberal academia families. But anyway.
Yeah, it's very common.
Yeah. Curtis comes out of gets into the tech industry and he writes a book kind of while he's working and like he's a founder and stuff for some company. He writes a book in 2001 titled Democracy, the God That Failed. Follows it up with a series of blog essays, and his writing becomes very influential among Silicon Valley proto-fascists. Yarvin's idea is, in brief, is that the US is run and a lot of Western society is really run by what he calls the cathedral, which is a mix of professors and journalists who act as a Brahmin class dominating the United States with a progressive state religion. He sees their egalitarian impulses as toxic, the destruction of natural civic order, and advocates for his followers to design new architectures of exit to replace the cathedral with what is effectively a right-wing dictatorship. The number one supporter of Curtis Yarvin's ideas and financial backer of him is Peter Thiel. Thiel has funded Yarvin's work, is a big fan of what he has to say and his philosophy, which is generally referred to as the Dark Enlightenment. And this is, when we're talking about the Dark Enlightenment, we're talking like mid-aughts is kind of when this stuff starts to really take off. This is before the alt-right that kind of becomes really well-known nationwide is a major term. This is like in the pre and right around Gamergate period is when he's really starting to take off with a lot of folks. And he feeds into the alt-right, to Trump, you know, and to that period of time, but he's much more on the pseudo-intellectual end of things as opposed to the like hitting folks in the street end of things. That's why he gets a lot of Peter Thiel money. Bronze Age pervert is kind of a he espouses a philosophy that rhymes with Moldbug's, with Yarvin's philosophy in many ways, but where Yarvin dresses his words and his writing up in a costume version of mainstream academic discourse, Bronze Age pervert is unapologetically online and weird, and he writes like somebody who spends too much fucking time on the internet. A lot of his stuff is cloaked in things that are like half jokes, or at least want to have plausible deniability of jokes, so that like if you take them seriously, he can make fun of you for falling for the bit. But he describes himself on Twitter as an aspiring nudist bodybuilder, free speech and anti-xenoestrogen activist. So just the most irritating kind of guy imaginable.
Just a normal guy.
much of his politics centers around a worship of ancient Greece, which he believes settled on the scientifically ideal human form. He believes men should engage in bodybuilding and nude sunbathing to emulate the Greeks. And you'll see sometimes his followers be like, oh, you're an idiot if you fell for that. But legitimately, half of what this guy posts about is just pictures of bodybuilders and his pictures of himself looking very jacked. Like if that's all a bit, then all he has is this silly bit, because it is dominant in his content. BAP's BAP's ancient Greeks are incredibly straight and hate women with a passion. One of those things is more or less right. Greek, like upper class Greeks, not super pro women.
Not woke.
Yeah, not woke. The cathedral in his eyes is an oppressive dictatorship of femininity, if not always of women, over masculinity. Cancel culture is a particular topic of his ire. And he seems to see it as basically that there are traditionally feminine methods of argumentation and conflict, whether or not women are the ones doing them in any given situation. Right. Cancel culture is like the purest expression of this. And he believes that these kind of feminine methods of conflict destroy masculinity and make cultural progress impossible. They chain men to this kind of like, he sees, you know how a lot of anarchists will talk about how ancient societies, hunter-gatherer societies and like were often more egalitarian than a lot of like medieval societies, classical societies. Yeah. This is often, you know, a lot of folks do make the mistake of like idealizing these cultures, but like that's a thing that gets talked about a lot positively by some anarchists. And I think obviously it's worth studying. He takes the opposite tact of like these ancient cultures, like people lived in the fucking mud and were miserable, and it was because they were egalitarian. It was because the women were dominating the men, right? This is going to lead us to the Longhouse in short order, but we have some more to cover right here. So he focuses a huge amount on anti-egalitarian arguments and on supporting a culture dominated by strong, beautiful, powerful people who look like Greek statues and suppress women and anyone else who doesn't look sexy. Basically, you get the feel like that's a big part of it to this guy. Like he wants a dictatorship of hot, violent men. That's a big part of what he argues with.
Has he watched Lenny Riefenstahl's Olympia? Because this seems
I feel like that's playing in the back of his fucking mind at all times. Yeah. Now, BAP argues that the state in its present form preserves the lives of the weak and feeble-minded, allowing them to oppress the naked Aryan bodybuilders, who by all rights ought to run things. The prime repository of his philosophy is his 2018 book, Bronze Age Mindset, which was at one point in the top 150 books on Amazon. A former Trump White House official told Politico in 2019, if you're a young person, intelligent, adjacent in some way to the right, it's very likely you would have heard of it. In chapter 35 of his book, Bronze Age Mindset, BAP writes, quote, should the tyranny that has descended on our age ever gain the power it seeks and then be challenged enough to feel itself in danger, the mass annihilations that will be carried out by homosexual, transsexual, and especially lesbian commissars will exceed in scale and cruelty anything that has yet happened in known history. Imagine lesbian mulatta commissars with young Martin Sheen face and haircut manning the future Bergen-Belsens, installations that will span tens of miles.
Yep. Sending you to the transgender gulag.
Yeah, it's something else, and it's very funny because like that fucking The Atlantic writer here, like talks about how he's got this like almost hypnotizing quality to his writing, and he's got this really fascinating mind that you just want to engage with, and it's. I'll read you a fucking quote from this guy's profile on Bronze Age Pervert, and try not to gag. I consider myself a connoisseur of brilliant lunatics, and I have a high tolerance for their lunacy if it has compensating virtues of, say, humor or ingenuity. But even I find BAP worrisome. What starts as comedy can become something more sinister, and BAP's shtick, while sometimes hilarious, shows every sign of transforming into a mode of new far-right radicalism. He goes on at various points to be like, yeah, he likes this book that I like, so I was willing to put up with the fact that he was bigoted for years because, like, we would talk about literature together. I just had so much respect for his mind that I was willing to be strung along for a long time. I know. I find this guy kind of insufferable.
A connoisseur.
Yeah, a connoisseur.
A connoisseur of pig shit.
Yeah.
I really love sifting through all the different types of donkey dung.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just can't lick quite enough shit.
Robert, you know what won't make you become a connoisseur of dog shit internet content?
What, James? What, James? What will not?
Well, it's a Washington State Highway Patrol. They bought some adverts.
That's I hope they are ready for the lesbian commissars. I am.
Yeah. They're the woke police.
And we're back. We're back. Oh yeah, so it was Joseph Conrad's novel Nostromo that this Atlantic writer and Bronze Age pervert both loved. Yeah, Here, I'll read you another fucking paragraph. For many years we corresponded. Costin's messages arrived irregularly, and the tone ranged from friendly and inquisitive to boorish and insulting. I went to South America on assignment. He sent long messages extolling the virtues of Joseph Conrad's Nostromo, which is set there. A friend who reads books like Nostromo and can talk about them is a friend worth putting up with.
South America. It's fucking not even a fucking country. Just incredible.
Just generally
Atlantic
South America.
Being.
And right after that, he says, after about 10 years, he took to calling my friends, and then he uses a series of slurs. At some point, he had begun bodybuilding, and he sent me a picture of himself shirtless with the message, "Do you like this pic of me?" Again,
he's a normal thing. Just a literature guy.
It's just a real genius. So Bronze Age pervert's writings.
Yeah.
He's
devastating prose.
One of the Greeks he's obsessed with, because he claims that frames himself as an expert on Greek society, which he portrays as something of a paradise. But he only knows about 6 guys, and one of them is Alcibiades. And Alcibiades was an Athenian general and a statesman who was a big player in the Peloponnesian War. He defected from Athens to Sparta, and then from Sparta to the Persian Empire before being recalled and reinstated as an Athenian general. He is a real motherfucker, and an interesting guy. And because he was so interesting and he was very charismatic in his own time, and this kind of very shady figure too, he becomes an early celebrity. He's one of the first famous people that's really out there. And a big part of why he stays famous is that Plato will write a lot about him and Socrates, right? And Plato's writing, I think, after they're dead. So a lot of Alcibiades is a character written by Plato as opposed to the actual historical fact about the dude. It's also worth noting, given how anti-queer BAP is, that Alcibiades and Socrates were lovers. Socrates was famously kind of a simp for Alcibiades, while Alcibiades was kind of a piece of shit to Socrates. A lot of fun stories about that, but these guys were not at all straight.
Pederasty was an institution in ancient Greece. Not that pederasty is the same as being gay.
No, I don't think that's the same as what was going on with these two dudes.
These dudes were just in love.
Yeah.
It's nice. I'm happy for them.
Mm-hmm. Bronze Age perverts' rants are profoundly silly to anyone who isn't a deranged chud obsessing over why girls don't like him while shooting steroids into his ass. But because that's a fertile demographic, he has influence among some important conservatives. Former White House
fertile in the technical sense of the word.
Not after all those steroids.
Yeah, you hit that testosterone too much.
Well, and none of these guys will let themselves touch a WOMs because they're so horrified by the concept of women.
Also true.
So, former White House speechwriter Darren Beattie followed him on Twitter and interacted with his writing, as did Minnesota State Senator Roger Chamberlain. Curtis Yarvin called him his White House cell leader. This is interesting to me because BAP himself has encouraged his young followers to avoid supporting him in public and instead hide their sympathies while taking positions in the government to institute his ideas. It's also worth noting that you can find some fans of Bronze Age pervert on the so-called Anti-Woke Left. There's clips out there from the Red Scare podcast, which the less said about the better, where the two hosts read segments of his book with a what seems like a degree of appreciation, calling it the good kind of racist.
Yeah, well, that also makes sense in terms of their kind of like anti-feminist stuff that they do.
Yes. And I think his writing, he has a very like florid purple prose style. I don't think it's good writing. I don't find it particularly engaging. It's very channy and kind of exhausting, but people who are dumb fall for it. So he's hit his demo well. Now, his influence is significant enough that some conservatives have sought to explain it. I found a fun write-up on AmericanMind.org that describes his appeal this way. So what exactly is the teaching of Bronze Age mindset, and why is it so attractive to so many young men? The answer, I think, is simple. It is a revitalized paganism, obsessed with strength and beauty. It appeals to today's young men because these things, strength and beauty, are exactly what contemporary society has tried so hard to deny them. The gospel of sun and steel, of vitalism and strength and power, are exactly what have been denied to the boys of the Western world, and their spirits militate against this. Everything great ever achieved, Bap tells us, was done through strong friendships between two men or brotherhoods of men, and this includes all great political things, all acts of political freedom and power. Now, I should note, part of what Bap gets at when he's talking about how these strong groups, friendships between two men or small brotherhoods of men, he is a big advocate, and one of the reasons why he is popular among like the Atomwaffen set is he's a big advocate of his followers forming small 2, 3, 4-man groups and training with weapons together and preparing for the future, day of the rope style thing. He doesn't use that term, but he's speaking to those people from like a more educated mindset. And there's, I think, an extent to which you could see his writing as trying to pull in that kind of educated upper crust kids of the upper middle class, with Ivy League educations who go into politics, trying to draw them in closer to the actual violent insurgent right, at least in terms of the sympathies of their ideas and support for methods of organizing that are more traditionally found against, the Elohim City set, right? I think there is a degree of that going on here. Now, Bronze Age Pervert is more supportive of Trump than a lot of these guys, largely because he finds him funny and sees him as an avatar of disruption and destruction.
It's like an accelerationist support.
Yeah, exactly. Which is actually, honestly, that's perfectly logical because Trump is accelerating both the death of the kind of conservatism that is state loyal, that is sort of system loyal, right? The George W. Bush kind of conservatism, which is very much system loyal.
Of the mid-2000s,
and Trump has done terrible damage to that and damage to the structure of the state in the whole. So it's perfectly logical for him to support Trump. He's not this is not inconsistent with the other things that he talks about. One of the people that Atlantic writer talked to is Michael Anton, a former Trump administration national security official who wrote a 2019 essay in the Claremont Review of Books about Bronze Age Pervert. He acknowledges that Bap's work is racist, anti-Semitic, anti-democratic, misogynistic, and homophobic, but suggested that that's all. That's not necessarily what he really believes. Maybe it is, but the big reason why he does this is it distracts leftists from his more serious secret heresies that are the real deep dark arcane wisdom at the center of it, hang out with your bros and train with guns or whatever, or hide in the fucking government and waiting for the right moment to strike, but then blow it all up when you make an ad for Ron DeSantis. That kind of cleverness. Anyway, Anton writes that Bronze Age Pervert, quote, speaks directly to a youthful dissatisfaction, especially among white males, with equality as propagandized and imposed in our day. A hectoring, vindictive, resentful, leveling, hypocritical equality that punishes excellence and publicly denies all differences, while at the same time elevating and enriching a decadent, incompetent, and corrupt elite. There you go. So what does all this have to do with longhouses? Well, let's finally get to that. Longhouse describes a category of dwellings that have existed on basically every landmass in the planet in some form stretching back to the Neolithic period. These are, in general, large halls, sometimes with private family rooms built into them, sometimes with communal sleeping arrangements, but always organized around a large single communal hall. In ancient days, these are where feasts would be held and where groups of families or tribes would huddle together in long, cold winters. Bronze Age Pervert conceives of the Longhouse as an example of the miserable lives primitive and shameful cultures, not his beloved Greeks, lived in before modernity. In his writing, he makes it clear that his fear is rule by degenerates and our fallen modernity will cause society to regress to this prehistoric misery. Now, part of his hatred of what he calls Longhouse culture is that in his mind, these dwellings were dominated by women who forced men to live inside the smoky, cloying, stinking confines. This is not really accurate to any kind of history. I expect his conception here comes largely from the fact that longhouses are often suspected, because we know relatively little about many of the cultures that had them, are often suspected of having been organized among matrilineal lines. In other words, if you as a dude marry a lady, you move into her family's longhouse, right? This does sink out. There are modern cultures that had longhouses or have longhouses who also live this way. The Iroquois being a good example, right? That was a longhouse culture, and which house you lived in was matrilineal. But it is a mistake to characterize matrilineal as meaning like the women are completely in charge, because they were not an Iroquois culture, nor many other cultures where longhouses existed.
Yeah.
Vikings lived in longhouses, and you might recognize their society as not precisely anti-masculine.
Yeah, the woke Vikings.
Yeah, the woke Vikings. So this is more of a problem, though, with the conceptions of the Longhouse that are spread by Bap's followers, because, again, he's using it as a shorthand for the fact that this kind of like prehistoric darkness of egalitarianism is going to destroy the only thing that, in his view, can bring progress, which is small groups of beautiful men enforcing their will through violence, right? That's what he talks about when he's talking about the Longhouse. His followers tend to use the Longhouse as a more of a shorthand for the kind of stuff Curtis Yarvin gets at with the Cathedral, a catch-all term for progressive modernity. Women who get to say no to sex and have their own credit cards, trans people on hormones, vegan meat substitutes, and yes, the Barbie movie. Now, I open this episode with a post about that movie by Lomez, an adherent of Bapism who wrote an interminable article on the Longhouse for a website called First Things, which describes itself as America's most influential journal of religion and public life.
I bet it is.
Yeah, I bet it is, buddy.
You can tell because they always let you know straight away if that's true.
Yeah, they really got to hit that up for you. I'm going to quote from that now. Even for those of us who use it, the Longhouse evades easy summary. Ambivalent to its core, the term is at once politically earnest and the punchline to an elaborate in-joke. Its definition must remain elastic, lest it lose its power to lampoon the vast constellation of social forces it reviles. It refers at once to our increasingly degraded mode of technocratic government, but also to wokeness, to the progressive, liberal, and secular values that pervade all major institutions. The most important feature of the Longhouse, and why it makes such a resonant and controversial symbol of our current circumstances, is the ubiquitous rule of the Den Mother. More than anything, the Longhouse refers to the remarkable overcorrection of the last 2 generations towards social norms centering feminine needs and feminine methods for controlling, directing, and modeling behavior. As of 2022, women held 52% of professional managerial roles in the U.S. Women earn more than 57% of bachelor degrees, 61% of master's degrees, and 54% of doctoral degrees. And because they're overrepresented in professions such as human resource management and compliance officers that determine workplace behavioral norms, they have an outsized influence on professional culture, which itself has an outsized influence on American culture more generally. So the WOMs have taken over human resources.
He sounds like he lost a fight with a thesaurus when he's writing that, at every point. He's just using an unnecessarily long word.
Yeah, it's also just like women are dominating society because they're getting more bachelor's degrees.
Yep, that's what it is.
Okay. Yeah, that's
the famously useful bachelor's degree, which always leads to employment in a powerful position.
To tremendous wealth. Oh, also, and the idea that human resources are in some degree to somehow setting the terms culturally as opposed to responding to the needs of corporations to mitigate risk, right? Like, that's what HR actually is. It's not setting an agenda. It is avoiding lawsuits. It is minimizing exposure. Whatever.
Yeah.
Lomez also goes on to quote Richard Hanania, an influential conservative thought leader who was revealed recently to be a neo-Nazi, or at least someone who regularly wrote neo-Nazi things in neo-Nazi parts of the web and wants to be seen as respectable now. We'll talk about him later. Lomez approvingly notes that Hanania echoes a Baptist talking point when he discusses how female domination of HR has given them control over public and private institutions. Now, again, the way Lomez is talking about this shit is not actually in line with how Bronze Age pervert conceives of the Longhouse. And one of the funnier results of everything that I've been talking about today is that Bronze Age pervert now spends much of his time on Twitter angrily tweeting at his followers that they're using the Longhouse wrong. I'm going to read you a post of his from July 27th. Longhouse has gone crazy out of control, usually misused. It's not a synonym for feminism or matriarchy, nor for group consensus, though those are part of the story. It's a concrete image from pre-Aryan Europe of lower life and of most traditional societies.
The author
your baby got away
again.
from you. Yeah. And some of his ire is likely due to the fact that his followers, who are largely very young, tend to apply what they see as his analysis to children's movies. Here's a real good one. Yeah, this is it's a post over a picture of like the female villain from the movie Tangled by Activated Sleeper. If you want a good example of the nebulous Longhouse, look no further than Mother Gothel, feigned narcissism, driven by resentment and envy of the young, whose primary and most effective weapons are gaslighting, manipulation, and the rhetoric of fanatical safetyism. It's good stuff.
Thank you, Activated Sleeper.
Thank you, Activated Sleeper, exposing
that great cutting commentary on 2012's Tangled.
Now, one of my favorite recent examples of how many of these guys use the Longhouse was a post in the Off My Chest Reddit, which went viral on Twitter. The post is by a woman who says that she interrupted her husband while he was telling a story, and he was like, "Hold up, Tony, men are talking," as like a joke, and she got angry at this, and they had a fight. One popular Baptist response to this story, 1,500 likes and counting when I found it, stated, "Men attempt to take one comedic step out of the Longhouse, and the locks get 10 times bigger."
Jesus Christ.
It is very silly to like bring up actual history with this, but one of the points you'll find in like writing about longhouses traditionally is that because everyone was cooped up in the winter come spring, the women were generally like doing everything they could to get the men to fucking leave and go hunt or something. Like, get the fuck out of that. Get out of here. Like, go do something else. We need like a fucking week or two without you hanging around.
Go to war. We don't care.
Yeah, go to war. Do something. Jesus Christ. Nobody likes being cooped up in a fucking longhouse. Anyway, that's the Longhouse. That's Bronze Age pervert. It is kind of worth noting because these guys are convinced that like they are the intellectual vanguard of this movement that's going to overturn what is classically described as liberalism, this idea that like people have like rights that are worth protecting and shit. That's a failed idea. It's obviously failed. Look at how ugly buildings are today. Then they'll post some picture of like the Chicago World's Fair. These people are like weirdly adjacent to the Tartaria conspiracy theory that 100 years ago the world was ruled by this like vast advanced Russian empire that made all the nice buildings, and then World War II was a secret excuse for the rulers of the world to destroy all the good architecture, and that's why buildings are ugly.
I've definitely seen like this BAP guy in those like circles of people who are like culture critic or like Greek enjoyer or whatever. And they post pictures of like old expensive architecture stuff and mixed in with like either like mostly mostly like brutalist or like modernist architecture to be like, what happened? Why don't we make buildings like this cathedral
why don't we
anymore?
do this anymore? Well, for one thing, like the society that people like you insisted upon is one in which like value is maximized at all costs. So we took windows out of my school that was built in that brutalist periods because it would cut down on heating costs.
Or because like it's like because some like prince bankrupted their country building this pretty building, and that's why we don't do that anymore.
Idiots like you who thought like jacked dudes with guns should run everything started a series of wars that bankrupted those countries, and they had to sell their nice buildings to the Americans. That's why we got the London Bridge, I assume.
But it's definitely all in that same rough Twitter milieu. I mean, it's certainly. Now that you've explained all of this about the Longhouse stuff, it certainly makes sense why they're kind of fawning over the Barbie movie. And I mean, very clearly Ken is going to become one of these like memeable characters because of what he does in the film. He's going to join the pantheon of like American Psycho and all of Ryan Gosling's other roles. It is fascinating how Ryan Gosling kind of has become like the literal poster child for much of like the dissident like anti-feminist right, just because of the types of roles that he's taken. But yeah, I mean it certainly makes sense.
Cautionary tale, male actors.
It certainly makes sense in context of the Barbie movie in terms of how they kind of structured all of the like social critique in that movie. But yeah, this is very silly. I mean, I'm excited. I won't have to hear much more about like the stunning poetic prose of Bronze Age perfect.
Fucking The Atlantic every time. It never fails to disappoint.
It's so like weird because there's this whole thing that opens the article where he's talking about how like, you know, the first strains of this new anti-democratic, you know, anti-liberal thinking in academia came out through philosophy students who, you know, realized that their professors just took for granted, you know, the truth about things like the value of human rights and weren't ready for their arguments against them. And it was these people who didn't want to be told not to think in certain ways. It's like, no, man, they were assholes. They're asshole rich kids who needed somebody to hit them in the fucking face. They need a folding chair deployed on them. Like, we all got to see recently.
I demand a shutdown of all coastal universities until we figure out what the fuck is going on.
Yeah. I'm sorry. If you were pretending that you are like somehow in the insurgent underground, as the son of an MIT professor going to MIT yourself, like, you fucking dilettante. That's all this fucker is a dilettante, and that's all most of the people following are. It's a mix of dilettantes and guys who are going to shoot up Walmarts. Anyway. Great.
Yeah. Cool.
Give him a follow.
Give him a follow.
I've been checking out Activated Sleeper, and I've learned a lot already. So
You're getting pilled by him?
Yeah, pretty much. I you know, as much as one can be pilled by a 14-year-old, but really interesting stuff here. I think fair to say that this is an insight into a world. Oh, buddy, fuck me. All right, we're not talking about that. We are not talking about his bedroom wall. Bye, everyone.
Oh, wait, now I gotta look.
James, what did you... We can bleep it. You have to at least tell us what you...
Oh, wow. His pinned...
It's fucking... I'm not sure if you can see
it's a Confederate flag.
No, what's on the bed,
Confederate flag and what looks like... Is that a German nationalist flag?
Buddy.
Is it like a German empire?
Oh,
no, there's yellow in there. Is that Imperial Germany? Yeah. I think this guy's a Kaiserreich dude.
No, dude, it's Franco.
It's a certainly impressive bedroom. I'm sure he's getting all the ladies in there.
I gotta show you guys this pinned tweet, and then I'll read it. It's all caps. Fed post. Let me tell you how much I want a Fed post. There are 100 billion neurons within my brain. If a Fed post was written on each and every one of those neurons, it would not equal 1/1000th of the compulsion I feel to Fed post at this micro instant. Fed post. That means posting about doing a terrorism so that the feds come and shoot you.
This is the type of tweet that could either come from some like mentally unwell leftist.
Yeah.
Or a Nazi. It's really
14,
unclear.
Yeah. The flag he has, just to be clear, it's a Francoist flag of Spain, which it's something that at some point we will have to talk about, which is the American right has been embracing Franco as like based and good for a while now. Like it's this kind of return to Catholic tradition and like it's this anti-woke crusader.
I do like all of the suggested follows here on Activated Sleeper's page. Sun Optimist.
Alaric the Barbarian, Imperator Philippus.
All of these people are such sad nerds.
He's retweeted a post from Bronze Age Jacob Urowski. Jews are like the One Ring for politics.
All right. Well, I think
we've done enough here.
I think we reached peak usefulness. I don't think we
guys. I hope you've all learned a lot from this.
Have a wonderful week,
everyone.
Have
a wonderful week, and fuck you for making me write this.
Yeah.
To our listeners.
Pro drivers live for race day, but for small business owners, every day is race day. That's why going pro with Lenovo Pro matters. One-on-one advice, IT solutions, and customized hardware powered by Intel Core Ultra processors keep your business on the right track. Business goes pro with Lenovo Pro. Sign up for free at lenovo.com/pro.
Lenovo. Support for the show comes from Public, the investing platform for those who take it seriously. On Public, you can build a multi-asset portfolio of stocks, bonds, options, crypto, and now generated assets, which allow you to turn any idea into an investable index with AI. It all starts with your prompt. From renewable energy companies with high free cash flow to semiconductor suppliers growing revenue over 20% year over year, you can literally type any prompt and put the AI to work. It screens thousands of stocks, builds a one-of-a-kind index, and lets you backtest it against the S&P 500. Then you can invest in a few clicks. Generated assets are like ETFs with infinite possibilities, completely customizable and based on your thesis, not someone else's. Go to public.com/podcast and earn an uncapped 1% bonus when you transfer your portfolio. That's public.com/podcast. Paid for by Public Investing. Brokerage services by Open to the Public Investing Inc. Member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services by Public Advisors LLC, SEC registered advisor. Generated assets is an interactive analysis tool. Output is for informational purposes only and is not an investment recommendation or advice. Complete disclosures available at public.com/disclosures.
Sink into affordable luxury. Anabay is the only machine washable sofa, inside and out. With stain-resistant slip covers and a cloud-like frame duvet, everything goes right in the wash. Plus, the modular design lets you change the look of your space anytime. Visit WashableSofas.com to upgrade your home. Shop up to 60% off site-wide, with sofas starting at just $699 and a 30-day money-back guarantee. Shop now at WashableSofas.com. Offers are subject to change, and certain restrictions may apply.
Welcome to It Could Happen Here, a podcast where if you're listening to this episode, it's the middle of the week. You probably know. You know what this podcast is. You know what it's about. I'm your host, Mia Wong. Now, if you've been reading the news about China at all in the past few years, you've probably at least heard of China's Belt and Road Initiative, probably followed by a stream of almost panicked fear-mongering about China displacing America's role in the world and luring countries into debt traps that allow the CCP to seize control of the country's assets and then its entire foreign policy. And all of this begs the question, what actually is Belt and Road? This is not a simple question, because Belt and Road isn't really a coherent single project at all. It is, effectively, a marketing term slapped onto an enormous array of loans, investments, some things that are effectively grants, infrastructure projects, and special economic zones across the world. The money for these projects comes from a variety of Chinese banks, and sometimes just like government agencies like the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and involve a vast array of different Chinese companies and contractors. So what are these banks and companies and governments actually up to? I'm going to run through 3 examples to get a sense of the kind of program that composes Belt and Road. One very common program is extending lines of credit to state oil companies of oil producers in order to secure China's supply of oil. I'm starting here because this is not typically what people think of when someone brings up Belt and Road. And it gets at a couple of the central complexities of Belt and Road. One is, a lot of this stuff is just, in some sense, almost banal attempts to just sort of secure natural resources by paying money for them and investing money in them, which is, very, very standard sort of capitalist behavior. But another complexity of this aspect of Belt and Road is that these loans to oil producers were happening well before Belt and Road ever existed. The credit lines were simply absorbed into Belt and Road when the project was announced in 2013, and now these loans are considered Belt and Road projects. This is a very common trend in Belt and Road. Much of the vaunted $1 trillion of investment in Belt and Road projects comes from the extension of pre-existing projects, which really sort of puts into perspective all of those very, very scary maps that you'll see where they're 100 blah, blah, blah countries have accepted Belt and Road projects. It's well, yeah, okay. How much of that's new and how much of that is just people who had some random agreement with China beforehand? Now, lest you think the fact that China is giving a bunch of money to Brazil State Oil Company means that this whole Belt and Road thing has something to do with socialism. Here's a quote from China's 13th five-year plan. Quote, "We will speed up efforts to implement the free trade area strategy, gradually establishing a network of high-standard free trade areas. We will actively engage in negotiations with other countries and regions along the route of the routes of the Belt and Road Initiative on the building of free trade areas." Now, this is the ancient neoliberal dream. It is a dream of a world where corporations can freely move their commodities across borders while maintaining, zones of just unlimited exploitation of workers in special economic zones. Now, speaking of sort of the condition of workers, let us move to a more typical Belt and Road project. Jamaica's North-South Highway. In 2014, at the astounding cost of $700 million, the Jamaican government opened the North-South Highway. Here's from an article that was republished in Lausan. Quote, "Since Jamaica needed a Chinese loan to finance the highway, Chinese Harbor Engineering Company was granted the right to own and operate the highway for 50 years as part of the arrangement. Also, the tolls collected on the highway cannot be used for debt servicing and rather go to the China Harbor Engineering Company directly as profit. Additionally, the tolls are astronomical by local standards. To drive the length of the highway in a standard car costs the equivalence of over $12 each way. This is well out of reach for the vast majority of Jamaicans, where the average monthly salary is about $600, and only 60% of workers have a waged or salaried position at all. Many of my respondents wondered, for whom was this highway? The answer may lie in the additional concessions granted to the China Harbor Engineering Company, primarily 1,200 acres of land across the highway to be held in perpetuity. Apparently, this will be used to construct hotels and adjoining infrastructure by Chinese companies for Chinese tourists. A kind of economic enclave from which locals would not benefit directly, as acknowledged by the then Jamaican Minister of Transport. Now, this sucks for Jamaican workers who, didn't get any of the money from the contract, which, went through Chinese firms that imported Chinese workers. And it's also not a great deal for the Jamaican government, which is an enormous amount of debt and gets seemingly very little for this. And this begs the question, why do countries agree to this? Now, the short answer is that they need money for development projects, and, for a poor country, that money is very hard to come by. Part of the popularity of the project is that economies who've been through the just devastating process of IMF structural reforms, who've had literally their entire economy and social system torn apart, who have literally watched food being taken from the mouths of their children in order to pay off IMF loans, are looking for literally any alternative. And as we've discussed on this show before, Jamaica itself was the first country, to be looted by the IMF, as its social democratic government was forced to shred its welfare state and its economy in the 70s as a condition for getting IMF loans. This history and the current day threat of more of these structural adjustments, should you attempt to go to the IMF for more loans, make it more likely that countries will turn to Belt and Road rather than the IMF to deal with their complete lack of development and to stave off economic crises resulting from the fact that their government has completely run out of money. And this is something even liberal imperialist institutions will admit. Here's from the Council on Foreign Relations Belt and Road Task Force report. Quote, in contrast to loans from traditional providers of development finance, China's loans are generally not concessional, and the Chinese Development Bank and the Export-Import Bank of China expect to make a return on their investments. The loans also lack policy conditionality. They contain few or no exceptions of host country economic policy or political reforms. Now, the Council on Foreign Relations concludes this with a very slick line that goes, quote, for many Belt and Road Initiative countries, especially authoritarian regimes, this is an attractive package, especially compared with other lenders who insist on reforms tied to loans. Now, okay, when you hear the words, when you hear that authoritarian regimes don't want to do the, quote, reforms tied to loans, that makes it sound like the quote unquote reforms are like, you dictators cede power to a democracy, you won't get IMF funding. That is not how IMF loan conditions work. What those reforms actually entail is much closer to sell every state-owned asset in the country to a bunch of American investors, and we will leave your children to die. Now, and this leads into some other stuff that the Council on Foreign Relations talks about a lot, which is, they have entire giant sections about corruption on Belt and Road programs, to which, the immediate response is like, man, do you know how much money the IMF gave Pinochet? They gave him over $1 billion in 1980s money. That is like $3 billion in today's money. Now, hilariously, the other people who gave Pinochet a boatload of money was the Chinese Communist Party. Although, orders of magnitude less, because this is like the 70s Chinese Communist Party, who do not have much money, but they had enough money apparently to give a bunch of it to Pinochet. And it's at this point that I want to remind everyone that China is the third largest voting member of the IMF, which is a real issue for both the sort of liberal and pro-CCP accounts of the conflict between the CCP and the IMF over providing loans. Because, contrary to the way both of these groups seem to think about sort of the modern capitalist economy, China is not an old communist radical like throwing stones at the liberal order from outside the house. They are part of the global financial institutions. And to the extent that, China can be fighting an institution that it is also a part of, right? To the extent that even makes sense to talk about, what you're really talking about is just intercapitalist competition over who gets to give people loans. Now, there's other interesting stuff in this report, like an admission that the Chinese, the sort of Chinese debt trap narrative is overblown. And this is true. The sort of case study about a Chinese company taking a port in Sri Lanka is not, it's not exactly like the story that everyone thinks it is. And, the Chinese company got the port after a bidding process and stuff. So, and this is true. And the fact that it's been used sort of hyped up to do fear mongering is absolutely true. However, the thing the Council on Foreign Relations can't actually sort of say is that the actual conclusion that you get if you look closely at sort of this combination of a country like Sri Lanka that has both IMF loans and like loans from China is that all of the lenders in the global capitalist economy absolutely suck, and they all exploit the working class of the debtor countries like in their own ways. Do you know who else exploits the working class of debtor countries? It is the products and services that support this podcast. And we're back. Now, what is notable about Belt and Road is that Belt and Road's infrastructure projects usually do actually get built. But for all of the sort of screaming about like China's geopolitical expansion, its attempt to subvert the democratic order, the actual reason why these projects, unlike, so many other large-scale development projects, actually happen and, actually do get built is much more banal. It is a product of internal Chinese economics. So to explain this, I'm going to turn to another example of a type of Belt and Road project. Giving countries loans to buy telecommunications and internet equipment from Chinese companies. Here's from Phys.org. China's demand for infrastructure, including communications and internet gear, is not as high as it used to be, said Chinese Development Bank President Zhang Zhiji. So what can we do with the excess production capacity? We can only send it abroad. We may give you loans to buy Chinese equipment or materials, but there must be a Chinese element, Zhang told AFP of his bank's loans to help Chinese firms abroad. Now, this is an interesting quote for a number of reasons. Recent sort of American and also Canadian, the Canadians went wild over this. Concern around Chinese telecom companies have, argued that the spread of Chinese communication technology is like a geopolitical power grab by the CCP. The Chinese Development Bank, however, kind of like lets the actual game slip, which is that the reason for these loans and, a major impetus for this sort of broader Belt and Road initiative is finding a solution to Chinese production overcapacity, which is the giant structural problem which sort of hangs like the doom of Damocles over the Chinese economy. And this is incredibly important. Foreign policy analysts have a tendency, which is replicated in the media, to think about Belt and Road as fundamentally a geopolitical tool. Take, for example, this line from Foreign Policy. Quote, "Will the developing world fall under China's sway? Many policymakers in Washington, D.C. certainly fear so, which is one of the reasons they have created the new International Development Finance Corporation, which is slated to begin operating at the end of this year. Like the Marshall Plan, which in post-World War II years used generous economic aid to fight the appeal of Soviet communism in Western Europe. The International Development Finance Corporation aims to help Washington push back against Beijing's sweeping Belt and Road initiative." Now, fascinatingly, the authors don't seem to understand what the Marshall Plan actually was. Now, the Marshall Plan, despite what you will probably read in sort of like mainstream diplomatic histories, was not originally was not really driven by anti-communism at all. It was in large part a product of massive industrial overcapacity in the post-war US, particularly in the automotive sector. Demand from the domestic American market couldn't support the enormously expanded auto industry's industrial capacity. And so the auto industry went to Congress and tried to get them to rebuild Europe as another market that they could sell that they could sell cars to that could absorb the product of their overcapacity. The only way they could actually get this to work was to tie it to a raft of anti-communism. And this is now how the project is remembered as this sort of grand anti-communist political strategy. And in this sense, Belt and Road can be understood as China's Marshall Plan. It is a bold attempt to forge an international solution to its domestic economic problems. And this means to actually understand what Belt and Road is, we need to go back to the beginning. In response to the financial collapse of 2008, China carried out what was, until COVID, the largest stimulus in human history, an incomprehensibly large Keynesian program focused on internal infrastructure development designed to shock the Chinese economy back into shape. And it worked for about 1 year. In 2010, the Chinese economy hit 10% year-on-year GDP growth, and it has been falling ever since. In 2011, the round of global uprisings kicked off by the Arab Spring hit China in the form of the Wuhan riots and a wave of strikes. And by 2013, a year into the first term of new Chinese President Xi Jinping, the economy was doing terribly, and the government was still not out of the woods politically either. In response, the government announced two programs within about 4 months of each other: Belt and Road and the so-called mini stimulus, another Chinese stimulus package aimed at improving Chinese rail. Is that the proper term for it? Aimed at improving the Chinese train network. Now, these two programs were effectively the same response to the economic crisis faced by the CCP. Rising wages and strike activity, and later environmental protests, were threatening the profitability of the Chinese manufacturing sector in its traditional coastal urban sectors like Shenzhen. The solution, then, was to move Chinese capital towards the interior of the country into more rural areas with lower wages, and then build an infrastructure network to export Chinese commodities abroad. This move served several purposes at the same time. On the one hand, cheaper rural workers were less likely to organize either strikes or environmental protests. On the other hand, some kind of rural investment could secure rural factional support for the party at a time when the rural Wuhan riots meant that such support was anything but assured. But even in 2013, it was clear that the vaunted Chinese transition to a consumer economy was going to fail. Because, and this is really blindingly obvious if you think about how the Chinese economy works for like 10 seconds. Okay, in order to have a consumer economy, you must have a class of consumers. Now, this requires average people to have a thing called money. And both Xi Jinping and the Chinese capitalist class more broadly just absolutely, resolutely refuse to do anything that like involves paying Chinese workers more, which is what you need to make this happen. And they just refuse to do it. It is genuinely stunning. Xi Jinping would literally rather force randomly the head, like the CEOs of corporations, to give money to charity and call it a government program before he would like fucking raise a minimum wage. So, you know, if you're in 2013, right, you can see the writing on the wall. You can see the Chinese economy isn't going to like turn into a consumer economy. There's been, you know, there's been some transition into like a service-based economy, but like, you know, ask the US how gross that a service-based economy works for you. And because they've seen the writing on the wall, Chinese capitalists start looking for ways to make money overseas. And this overlaps with a growing demand to do something with the enormous reserves of American dollars that China has from like basically propping up the US economy by buying like $1 trillion of US bonds in the 2000s and early 2010s. And like, you think I'm joking when I say like $1 trillion, but it is actually around $1 trillion. Well, okay. This is where I need to make an enormous disclaimer. Oh boy, okay. It is atrociously difficult to get reliable economic statistics out of China to the point where, like, the Chinese central government, when they get data from their own provinces who are legally required to report data to them, they have to mess with the data to make it make literally any sense at all. They have these equations that they like apply to the statistical data from the provinces they get, that are effectively attempts to calculate how much the provinces are lying to the central government and how, you know, and try to figure out a way to fix it. And, you know, they are doing things out of like the old late Soviet Union. They are using satellite pictures to check how much light there is from factories at night. They are like measuring how many freight trains are like going into a province and trying to use that to estimate their actual industrial capacity. It is wild. And that is just the CCP trying to figure out its own numbers. And that means, right, that the numbers the CCP actually decides to release when they're done trying to get the data to look kind of real so they can understand what's going on in their own economy. So there's that data, which is unreliable because, again, like, you're dealing with everyone just lying to you about what the data is. But then the data the CCP actually releases, oh boy. So we're going to come back to this in a little bit. But Chinese youth unemployment right now is 20%. And the CCP's response to this is they've announced that they refuse to release any more youth unemployment numbers until they finish, like, recalculating it or something. So great stuff. Amazing stuff happening in the world of Chinese statistical annexes. It is awful. I don't wish this on anyone. Now, all of this is to say that the case I'm about to make is probably true. Like, there's like a 90% chance that what I'm about to say is true, but we don't 100% know because it relies on Chinese economic data that is incredibly sketchy. And a lot of this has turned into this sort of like game of financial hide and seek with all these assets that are in weird places. But what seems to have happened is that a lot of Belt and Road projects are being funded by Chinese foreign exchange reserves, which is those trillions of dollars of like bonds I was talking about earlier, of that, you know, were moved from the People's Bank of China, which is China's central bank, to like other banks. And then those banks use that to do investments. And this appears to be some of the money that was used to fund Belt and Road projects. And this is where things get very sketchy. Now, these banks seem to initially have been flush with capital, which, you know, contributed to a massive, like, as the product is initially starting and up through about 2018, like, it's just, you know, it just keeps, the amount of money going into this keeps increasing. And then in 2018, it starts to slow. And then after the pandemic, and particularly after like 2021, 2022, like, the amount of money that's going into Belt and Road projects has imploded, and the amount of loans that the CCP is writing off has just diminished enormously. Now, okay, this is the sketchy part. You will see a lot of people, if you look into this, who are going to argue that the reason that these loans have sort of dried up, and the reason that this has been decreasing, is that China is like burning through its reserve of foreign exchange. Like, it's burning through its reserve of like US dollars that it has in its banks. This may be true. Maybe it's probably not true of like 2018 because, and this is the thing that's been discovered very recently, a lot of Chinese, a lot of things that like have technically foreign exchange reserves, or like technically aren't classified as foreign exchange reserves because they've been, weird stuff has happened to the balance sheet. I don't know, it's kind of a mess, but like it seems like China has way larger. They have these things called shadow reserves that are the things that they've been using to like turn Forex into like investments. And this seems to indicate that China has like way larger foreign exchange reserves than it technically are on the balance sheet. So what the actual relationship between how much foreign exchange reserves China has and how much money is putting into Belt and Road, we don't know. It's a disaster. But what we do know is that these investments were not like sort of like mere geopolitical tools, right? These investments were actually designed to make money. And that means that they were and still are an attempt to solve sort of the weakness of the Chinese economy by finding ways to invest capital with better returns than the absolutely terrible and increasingly dog shit rates that you can find in China. And this is something that we've been seeing, you know, in the last year. We've been watching sort of the dogs come, like the chickens come home to roost for the Chinese economy, where, like, you know, all this debt buildup's paying off. Well, I say paying off. All this debt buildup is, you know, like really starting to damage the economy. Like, the housing market's kind of imploding. And, you know, Belt and Road was supposed to be sort of the answer to this, right? If you combined the fact that we know for a fact that these loans are an attempt to actually like generate returns, and we also know that these loans are a way to sort of stimulate demand for Chinese goods that there's no domestic market for, we get this clear picture of what's really driving Belt and Road. It's the crisis of Chinese capital, which in and of itself is just sort of a reflection of the global crisis of overproduction and underconsumption that's, you know, haunted the world since the 1970s. Now, there's one last aspect of Belt and Road that we need to talk about that gets way less attention than any other aspect of the initiative. Belt and Road also acts as a work program for a very specific kind of Chinese worker. Belt and Road projects, as you see in Jamaica, are run by Chinese corporations almost always. I mean, occasionally other firms get contracts, but mostly it's Chinese corporations. And they import Chinese workers to do the work. And, we've looked at it from the Jamaican end where, Jamaican workers are getting screwed out of jobs and wages. But we should also look at it from the perspective of Chinese workers as well. Working in China, as we've discussed elsewhere extensively, sucks ass. Wages are dog shit, the hours are inhuman, and there's intense competition for what jobs do exist. On the other hand, salaries for Chinese workers on Belt and Road projects are much, much higher than they are for the same job in China. Amazingly, Chinese corporations abroad actually have less ability to just not pay people for their work, which is, the thing that, usually the first thing that rich people try to do when they are faced with having to pay someone. And Chinese corporations absolutely constantly attempt to just not pay their workers. And as a bonus to that, on top of the fact that you're like actually getting paid and you're getting paid way more than you would for working a job in China, these Belt and Road jobs have a much faster promotion track, and the cost of living is much lower than it is in China, which allows workers to save money and send remittances back home. This means that Belt and Road jobs, which are specifically, in sort of like nationalist circles, conceptualized as, quote, Africa, which is, oh boy, is seen as, but it's seen as a way out for Chinese workers. And we actually talked about this a long time ago in our Lying Flat anti-work episodes. Part of the origins of Lying Flat was his reaction to this sort of like nationalist discourse about like finding your own personal Africa to break out of like Chinese involution. And, from this kind of like ultra nationalist, like really racist, like concept, you get this like left-wing backlash, co-opting of like the refusal to work that is, lying flat. But for our purposes right now, the important thing about this is Belt and Road was a solution to a sort of new, like highly educated Chinese working class who, were suddenly realizing that like this education that they'd put literally everything into and this like they sunk their entire lives into was just going to get them nowhere. And, Belt and Road appeared as this sort of mirage of a way out, but it's not. It's not a way out for Chinese workers. It's its own kind of imperialism. It's the same sort of shit that oil companies do, where they send highly paid American workers to oil wells in Nigeria to avoid having to deal with, a class of skilled and politically sophisticated Nigerian oil workers. It's the same kind of sort of racial divide and conquer that funds Chinese workers at the expense of workers in Jamaica. And that ultimately is the core of both Belt and Road and the American response to Belt and Road. It is a desperate attempt to keep the embers of capital burning by lighting the working class on fire and feeding it to the flames.
Pro drivers live for race day, but for small business owners, every day is race day. That's why going pro with Lenovo Pro matters. One-on-one advice, IT solutions, and customized hardware powered by Intel Core Ultra processors keep your business on the right track. Business goes pro with Lenovo Pro. Sign up for free at lenovo.com/pro.
Lenovo. Support for the show comes from Public, the investing platform for those who take it seriously. On Public, you can build a multi-asset portfolio of stocks, bonds, options, crypto, and now generated assets, which allow you to turn any idea into an investable index with AI. It all starts with your prompt. From renewable energy companies with high free cash flow to semiconductor suppliers growing revenue over 20% year over year, you can literally type any prompt and put the AI to work. It screens thousands of stocks, builds a one-of-a-kind index, and lets you backtest it against the S&P 500. 100. Then you can invest in a few clicks. Generated assets are like ETFs with infinite possibilities, completely customizable and based on your thesis, not someone else's. Go to public.com/podcast and earn an uncapped 1% bonus when you transfer your portfolio. That's public.com/podcast. Paid for by Public Investing. Brokerage services by Open to the Public Investing Inc. Member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services by Public Advisors LLC, SEC registered advisor. Generated assets is an interactive analysis tool. Output is for informational purposes only and is not an investment recommendation or advice. Complete disclosures available at public.com/disclosures.
Tired of spills and stains on your sofa? Wash away your worries with Anabei. Anabei is the only machine washable sofa inside and out, where designer quality meets budget-friendly prices. That's right, sofas start at just $699. Enjoy a no-risk experience with pet-friendly, stain-resistant, and changeable slipcovers made with performance fabric. Experience cloud-like comfort with high-resilience foam that's hypoallergenic and never needs fluffing. The sturdy steel frame ensures longevity, and the modular pieces can be rearranged anytime. Shop WashableSofas.com for up to 60% off site-wide, backed by a 30-day satisfaction guarantee. If you're not absolutely in love, send it back for a full refund. No return shipping or restocking fees. Every penny back. Upgrade now at WashableSofas.com. Offers are subject to change, and certain restrictions may apply.
Hi everyone, it's me, James, today, and I'm joined by Megan Bodett, who's the Director of Research at the Kurdish Peace Institute. We're picking up where we left off at the end of last week to discuss more about the autonomous administration in north and east Syria, and perhaps more specifically to talk about the detainees, the ISIS detainees in the Al-Hol camp and in other camps around there. How are you, Megan?
I'm doing well. Thank you, James. Thank you for having me on for this important conversation about a really critical security and humanitarian issue that we're seeing in northeast Syria these days.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So I think to start out with, would you be comfortable giving a sort of baseline explanation of like what's happening with these ISIS detainees and why, despite the fact that many of them are citizens of other countries, they haven't been returned there?
Yeah, that's a very important place to start with. So essentially, after the territorial defeat of ISIS in 2019 by the Syrian Democratic Forces and the International Coalition, the Syrian Democratic Forces and the Autonomous Administration, which is the political body governing northeast Syria, ended up with tens of thousands of ISIS detainees and the family members of these ISIS members as well. And in the Al-Hol camp, you now have a population of essentially ISIS-affiliated women and the children of ISIS members who are now housed in that camp as well. And this camp is a serious humanitarian issue. You have these children who are in very difficult conditions. It's a massive security problem for the surrounding Syrian and Iraqi communities that were victimized by ISIS and the world. ISIS openly wants to reconstitute itself. It is operating inside the camp clandestinely to reconstitute itself. It wants to break prisoners out and go right back to its genocidal policies against minorities in the region like Yazidis and Christians, and to continue terror attacks, not only in Iraq and Syria, but around the world. It's also a real drain on the resources of the Autonomous Administration and the SDF themselves, who we have to remember are not a state actor, but are dealing with the sort of problems that even the wealthiest and most militarily established state actors would have trouble with. So they've ended up in this unenviable position of having to take care of essentially criminals from around the world who came to their country to commit mass atrocities, while the victims of these ISIS crimes across northern and eastern Syria and victims of the subsequent Turkish invasions that northern and eastern Syria suffered during and after the fight against ISIS really lack basic resources. Now, this is something I heard a lot on the ground when I was in the region in February and March, speaking to people from Afrin, which was invaded and occupied by Turkey in 2018, and to people from Serikaniye and Tel Abyad, which were invaded and occupied by Turkey in 2019. Many of them asked, rightly, why there were so many resources from international bodies and NGOs and governments provided towards the ISIS detainees in Al-Hol and the ISIS-affiliated individuals there, when their communities, their families who had done nothing other than simply living in areas that Turkey decided to invade and occupy, who were displaced because of that in what experts, including myself, would refer to as ethnic cleansing, these communities are receiving nothing from the international community. You know, they feel forgotten, and they have some serious questions about that. Of course, the autonomous administration has many needs and many pressing security problems that it simply can't devote enough resources to when it's tasked with managing the world's ISIS members. So in a recent study that we published at the Kurdish Peace Institute by journalist Matt Broomfield, who spent a lot of time on the ground in northeast Syria during and after the defeat of ISIS, he found that just 4% of foreign ISIS fighters held by Syrian Kurdish authorities have been repatriated since 2019. 4%. Wow. Yeah, the most of the repatriations have been women and children, not the fighters themselves who are housed in prisons. But of course, the women and children are a humanitarian issue and a security issue too. So think about that. Those are really dangerous numbers.
Yeah, I think that differentiation between like fighters and women and children is interesting, and perhaps one we should like pick apart a little bit, because we talked about this before we recorded. Like there's a betrayal. Certainly of like Western women who went to join ISIS as having been sort of victims in their own right, which some of them were very young, right, and might not have been making like adult choices at that time, and that's one thing. But like a lot of these people willingly participated in an extremely oppressive and violent regime, and they sort of are being they're often not portrayed as such in the press. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Look, what I always go back to when I talk about this issue is reading accounts from Yazidi women and children who survived ISIS captivity, who've said on multiple occasions that the women were no less brutal than the men, and that they were willing participants in every aspect of the worst of ISIS crimes, of genocide, of crimes against humanity, against the Yazidi people, and of course all the other peoples that ISIS targeted. So that, I think, when you have these genocide survivors saying that, no, these women participated fully in these crimes, they facilitated these crimes, they made this system of genocide, of crimes against humanity possible, that's something we have to listen to. And I'm glad that you bring up the Western media portrayal, because you see this idea that the women could not have been perpetrators themselves, when what we hear on the ground is that that's not true. And what legal cases have begun to find is that that's not true either. There's been trials in Europe for ISIS-affiliated women for their complicity in acts of genocide against the Yazidi community. And, you know, one point that you hear very commonly on the ground is that how can there have only been one or two, just a handful of trials? I'm not sure the exact number. But after all of these people missing, all of these people killed, how are all of these ISIS members, and that's why I said, you know, ISIS-affiliated women, because I do agree with you, it's a disservice to just refer to them as ISIS brides or whatever sensationalistic media framing you have. These people simply aren't being put on trial. And one of the reasons for that is that when we come to female members of ISIS, there is this perception, both in media and from governments, from international institutions, that these women are victims, that because they're women, because they subscribed willingly to a political and ideological system that was very, very oppressive of women, that puts women only into certain roles as housewives, as mothers of the next generation of ISIS, that these women couldn't have committed atrocities, but they have, they did. And you know what we're hearing right now in some of the reporting that's coming out of northeast Syria is that even within the camps, these women have continued to commit some of the most serious abuses that ISIS has been committing. There's reports that they have raped, sexually assaulted the teenage boys who are in the camp in order to essentially become pregnant and raise more children, to create that next generation of ISIS that they seek to create. And so this continued perpetration of sexual violence against these boys who've done nothing other than had the misfortune to have their parents be members of ISIS, you know, this is a very, very serious allegation. The reporting about this is something that needs to be taken very seriously. Like I said, this is a massive human rights crisis for these children. Yeah. And it is, these women are no less dangerous and no less culpable for their crimes than their male counterparts who joined ISIS.
Yeah, I think that's very fair to say. And it's somewhat of a sexist outlook to be women couldn't have had agency in the way that men clearly have been held accountable for. And I think it's the last issue you raised is obviously pretty horrible. But also we should at least dig into a little bit, I think, the ongoing, not only the abuse of children, but the sort of attempt to indoctrinate children into that same extremist ideology, the attempt to even I've seen videos of kids training with little wooden guns and sort of raising another generation of people who believe in this kind of hateful outlook. And can you talk a little bit about how common that is, or how, I guess you don't know entirely, but can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, that is something that none of us know how common it is because of the sort of difficulty of accessing that information. But if you look at what is coming in from sources from North and East Syria, from international reporting on the camp, these women are indoctrinating their children into the ISIS ideology. They have said many times over in many of their communications that their goal is to raise the next generation of ISIS fighters. There's no reason to believe that the majority of these women have given up on their beliefs. And there is evidence that this is what they're trying to do. And of course, when you look at the broader situation that these children are in, it's a situation that's exceedingly conducive to radicalization because of the poor conditions in the camps, because of the fact that they remain with their mothers, many of whom believe firmly in ISIS ideology and who see the role of women in ISIS as doing exactly that, as passing down this ideology. And, when these children, they can't be safely repatriated to their countries, they can't be put into safe environments where they can receive the support they need, the positive influences they need, any kind of medical or psychological help that they need. In these conditions, it's inevitable that you're going to have the continuation of this ISIS ideology being perpetrated, and the adults there, these women, continuing to pass this down on these children who, again, have done nothing to be put in the situation that they're in. They're continuing to be victimized by the actions of their parents and the other ISIS members. So, and the international community, too, is at fault here, for refusing to repatriate at least these children and to try ISIS perpetrators of war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide.
Yeah, in some cases, they've even been had their citizenship stripped from them of the countries that they came from. The UK have done that, for example, right? Which is kind of just failing to do anything to acknowledge that this is an international problem that they have some part in fixing.
And that's something we can get into, is the international dynamic surrounding these issues, because it's obviously very closely related to the ISIS issue, but it touches on so many other very internationalized conflicts as well.
Yeah, let's do that. Perhaps before we explain the way nations that are more distant from this are engaging with it, we should talk about how nations that are more proximal to this are engaging with it, and specifically how at times it seems like Turkish drone strikes, which we've discussed previously on our podcast, so people will be familiar with them, have at the very least not helped the SDF to keep these camps secure, right? And in some cases, it's you can see there's a video that the YPJ have of these people celebrating a drone strike inside the camp. And can you talk about the impact these drone strikes have?
Look, something that has been reported by journalists, by local sources, and by all sorts of international researchers and experts since the earliest days of the war against ISIS is that Turkey wanted ISIS to succeed in its mission of taking over northern Iraq and northern Syria in order to not only destroy Kurdish political and military structures operating there, including the YPG, the YPJ, later the SDF, and the Autonomous Administration, but also to destroy the social base for any form of Kurdish autonomy, any kind of multi-ethnic project to potentially be able to exist there either now or in the future. And this facilitation of the rise of ISIS reached such a level that you've had legal experts through the Yazidi Justice Committee, which published an in-depth report on this last year, find, based on a review of the evidence, that Turkey was, quote, complicit in the commission of genocide, end quote, by ISIS, by allowing fighters to cross its borders to join the group, allowing ISIS-related economic activity to go on, and other forms of facilitation of the rise of ISIS when it was committing its most serious crimes. So this is not something new. The way that these drone strikes specifically impact this issue, they're part of the broader Turkish campaign of aggression against northeast Syria. Obviously, the two ground invasions of Afrin and of Serikani and Tel Abyad had very negative impacts on the fight against ISIS. And the drone strikes now, first of all, they make it difficult for any SDF or autonomous administration structure to simply do the day-to-day work of providing security and providing the government. You know, if a government official or a member of the local security forces has to modify their behavior, has to modify where they go, how they interact with their constituents, you know, what kind of missions they can conduct to avoid being assassinated in a drone strike, they're simply not going to be as effective, right? So this is a problem in many areas. It certainly impacts the counter-ISIS mission. And Turkey has specifically started to increasingly target AANES, SDF, and Asayish internal security forces personnel who are directly engaged in counter-ISIS missions. We saw this in late 2022 when there were severe Turkish air operations following a bombing in Istanbul that Turkey, based on all evidence, falsely attempted to attribute to Kurdish groups, despite there being no real evidence supporting that claim. These attacks targeted civilians, civilian infrastructure, and SDF forces engaged in key counter-ISIS missions, including SDF forces involved in securing the Al-Hol camp. And now we've even started to see, in addition to these anti-SDF, anti-autonomous administration drone strikes, Turkey's been using drones to fire essentially warning shots at the international coalition led by the US and the other coalition countries itself. We saw this in November when there was a drone strike on the joint SDF coalition base, where the SDF and the international community worked together to plan ongoing counter-ISIS missions. And earlier this year, in I believe April of this year, the drone strike on Suleimania International Airport in Iraqi Kurdistan, where there was a joint SDF coalition convoy, where SDF Commander-in-Chief Mazloum Kobani was present and US forces were also present. That strike, for all intents and purposes, was Turkey's attempt not only to threaten the SDF and the autonomous administration, but to threaten the coalition as well, specifically for its continuing counter-ISIS partnership with Syrian Kurds. So this has risen to a level where Turkey's not only using these to disrupt governance and security at the local level in the autonomous administration, it's not only using them against locally led SDF, YPG-led counter-ISIS missions, but Turkey is using drones to threaten the entire global counter-ISIS campaign, of which on paper it's formally a member. So there you go.
Yeah, and Turkey's kind of, we talked about this again before, how it pressured newer NATO members, like Finland and Sweden, to even stop accepting Kurdish refugees, right? It's while at the same time being a member of NATO, and as you say, also drone striking other members of NATO. It's certainly it's making it as hard as possible for people in this part of the world to have the stability and peace and the things that they fought so hard for such a long time. I wonder if you can talk about so what is as far as the international community exists, which is a pretty nebulous thing to really kind of pin down, but what is specifically this US-led coalition to defeat ISIS, I think they call it, doing to help? And I guess a little more broadly building on that, this coalition has a very narrow focus in a place where there are a lot of different aggressors, to include various other Islamist groups, to include the Turkish state, and obviously the state in Syria. Can you explain a little bit about how the mission of this coalition is narrow in a way that that helps it doing the things that people on the ground then need to ensure peace and stability?
Yeah, exactly. That's a really important question because, as you said, this international relationship with Northeast Syria is very narrowly built on a counter-ISIS focus, which means a military focus. So there's relationships between security forces and security forces. What we don't see are political relationships. And this connects to a wide variety of issues related to this immediate problem of ISIS, of securing ISIS prisoners, of bringing ISIS perpetrators of genocide and war crimes to justice. But it also connects to the deeper problem of the kind of long-term stability in Syria that's necessary to end this ongoing civil war, to bring justice to the victims of ISIS and to all other abuses and atrocities during the 12 years of conflict in Syria, and to prevent the next endless war in this region from inevitably taking place in the future. So we have this narrow military partnership. The reason that this relationship evolved in this way was going back to the role of Turkey, because the United States and its European allies had no other option but to partner with Kurdish groups if they wanted to achieve a territorial defeat of ISIS in Iraq and Syria. There was no force other than the SDF and the YPG and the YPJ at that time that would be capable of the military responsibility of defeating ISIS. It was essentially, if people remember, the resistance of the YPG and the YPJ at Kobani in northeastern Syria that held out long enough where the United States and the international coalition realized that their only option, if they wanted to defeat ISIS on the ground, was to partner with these forces. Before that, also, we're recording this in August, the situation in Sinjar, where ISIS had gone in, had committed genocide against the Yazidi community, and were the only people who were able to actually come in and help Yazidis defend themselves and evacuate refugees to safety in Syria, were again the YPG, the YPJ, and the PKK guerrillas as well. Because these Kurdish forces were able to help local civilians in Sinjar defend themselves and evacuate so many refugees to safety, it forced the international community's hand to act. The PKK intervened in Sinjar to start that humanitarian mission on August 4th. U.S. airstrikes began on August 7th. It was this local response from these non-state actors that forced the international community, these states with actual treaty obligations to respond to and prevent mass atrocities, to take action. But because Turkey views the PKK as a terrorist group, it views the YPG and the YPJ as indistinguishable from the PKK and therefore as a terrorist group, the entire counter-ISIS mission from the very beginning was faced with this question of how these states that wanted to fight ISIS could do so without offending their relationships with Turkey as a member of NATO and an ally in other respects. So this connects specifically to the ISIS issue, not only because the contradiction here dates back to the counter-ISIS campaign, but because actual international trials for ISIS members, actual security policies that could address the problems in Al-Hol, would legitimize the SDF and the Autonomous Administration on the international stage, and would legitimize the political philosophies behind what they're doing, all of which Turkey deems to be a very serious national security threat to its existence. I mean, imagine you have a Kurdish woman judge questioning an ISIS member responsible for potentially European and American casualties, certainly responsible for casualties and all sorts of abuses across Iraq and Syria, about the evidence that we have, that the international community has, that Northeast Syria has, about how Turkey facilitated ISIS actions, with the YPG and the YPJ there for security, with international observers from the US and other coalition countries facilitating, providing legal and security support. That would absolutely destroy Turkey's narrative about what individuals and entities are terrorists and which ones have actually contributed not only to the territorial militarily defeat of ISIS, but to social and political and governance projects that are able to prevent, the resurgence of the next ISIS. So, this kind of fear of building political relationships with the Autonomous Administration, with this fear of legitimizing the Autonomous Administration project and helping it address security problems in a way that would, both increase its standing and legitimacy locally and internationally, and would show how the actions of states like Turkey contributed to prolonging and intensifying the civil war in Syria. States simply don't want to do that yet. But, when we look at the long-term consequences of whether it's allowing Turkey to continue aggressive actions against northeast Syria and more broadly to pursue a military solution to its Kurdish conflict, whether it's allowing ISIS atrocities to go unpunished, leaving communities that were impacted by ISIS to be essentially re-traumatized and left to live in difficult conditions, not receiving justice, and allowing these ISIS members to continue to have the space to attempt to reconstitute their group and go back to the kind of atrocities they were committing and attacks they were carrying out worldwide in 2014, 2015. In the long run, this sort of appeasement of Turkey over the issue of the Kurdish question and the role of the autonomous administration, it's going to create the start of the next endless war in the Middle East. If policymakers want to avoid that, they need to be addressing these problems from a pro-peace perspective, from a perspective that brings about justice, political solutions based on democracy, on gender equality, on the equality of all communities in the region. All of these values that, while imperfectly, the autonomous administration is really trying to fight for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's super important to point out that this isn't necessarily a Turkey versus Kurdish people dichotomy, or those aren't the only people impacted by this, right? Because I think the majority of the AANES is not Kurdish people, right? And I think the majority of the SDF also are not Kurdish.
I mean, there's a very good paper by Dr. Amy Austin Holmes, who wrote in an analysis of this conflict and the sort of Turkey SDF security dynamics that what we would refer to as the Turkish-Kurdish conflict or the Turkey-PKK conflict is actually a conflict that impacts every ethnic and religious group in Turkey, Iraq, and Syria. And of course you have, and we could do an entire other episode on this, there are certainly Kurds who support Erdogan and the AKP, whether from an Islamist perspective or on the basis of class interests. And you have Turks, ethnic Turkish people, who went to northeast Syria during the height of the fight against ISIS as members of socialist groups to provide humanitarian aid and to join Kurdish forces in their fight against ISIS on the ground. You have Yazidis, Christians, Syriacs, Assyrians, Armenians, Arabs, all different ethnic groups in Iraq and Syria that are very much impacted by this conflict. And particularly because of the autonomous administration's multi-ethnic and multi-religious model. And while the autonomous administration system certainly has its shortcomings and hasn't been able to perfectly overcome years and years of sectarian and religious and ethnic challenges, it has made a real attempt at including all of the peoples of the region. And that's one of the reasons why, despite all of these Turkish attacks, despite the threat of ISIS, these communities have continued to band together and participate in SDF and autonomous administration structures in order to try to build governance and real post-ISIS security. So it's certainly not just a very narrowly defined Turkish-Kurdish issue. It's an issue of civil rights, of political rights, of long-term security and stability, of what kind of society and what kind of governance can and should exist in this region, where many Kurds and many other ethnic and religious minorities would argue the European imposition of artificial borders and nation states onto areas that were multi-ethnic and multi-religious for thousands and thousands of years was the source of a lot of these problems that we see today, not only with ISIS, not only with the Syrian war, with the Kurdish conflict in Turkey as well, with many of the issues that we're seeing in Iraq, in Iran, all over the region. So it goes much deeper than that. And I think that understanding, the very deep historical roots of these issues is what can start to point us to the actual very radical solutions that would be necessary to get long-term peace and security.
Yeah, and that those aren't, I think, solutions, like you say, many nation states are still exercising kind of pseudo-colonial control over these places or trying to at least sort of use force to extract wealth, are really open to. And so it creates this sort of half-assed, like you've said, this sort of limited support for only some parts of a project, which it doesn't work if you only support part of this project, right, as we're seeing. I wonder, if people are interested in following more about this, I think it's something that, so much of the coverage of this whole area focuses on, specifically women in Al-Hol, right, or women who went to join ISIS. where can people find out more about like what sources would you suggest for following goings on in this area?
So yeah, I would say following local Syrian and Kurdish news sources would be a good place to start. You have sites like North Press, where I've written before, that provide good perspectives from Syrian Kurdish writers. You have human rights organizations working on the ground, groups like Syrians for Truth and Justice that's done a lot of documentation of issues like, for example, ISIS members who've joined Turkey-backed groups in the occupied areas. You have arguably one of the best English language resources, not only for their own publications, but for researchers and journalists to reach out to, the Rojava Information Center, that does a lot of good work on their own and also a lot of really incredible work to facilitate the work of international researchers and journalists. Mm-hmm. You have the Kurdish media sites like Hawar News that will give good updates on what the autonomous administration is doing and saying from their perspective. Of course, there are a lot of official pages and sites for autonomous administration and SDF institutions as well. Those tend to be in Kurdish or Arabic. So, of course, if you know either of those languages, you can follow them. For English, you have some of the SDF-affiliated sites that have been translated. The YPJ Information and Documentation Office have done a lot of work on this issue of ISIS and the related security challenges. They publish in English. They provide good information from that security perspective. And then really, I think any sources on social media, online, that provide good perspectives from people who are on the ground, who are providing reputable information, whether it's from a human rights side of things, from the security side of things, from the administration side of things. It's good to get that full spectrum of perspectives of what different actors are doing and seeing. And then, of course, I'd be remiss if I did not promote my own institution. We have published coverage of certainly the ISIS issue in northeast Syria, but also a lot on the wider political, humanitarian, and security challenges related to these interlocking conflicts in Turkey, Syria, Iraq, Kurdistan, that have sort of formed the very unstable basis on which these developments relevant to global security issues like ISIS are taking place. So you can certainly read what we've been publishing.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent list of resources, and lots of the ones that I've been using are the ones that you've mentioned. I would just, I suppose, warn people, especially the latest YPJ Information and Documentation Center video on our whole, comes with a heavy content warning for violence. That you will see there, which is, it's documenting things that happen. It's not like they are doing the violence. They're not, but still, if that's something you don't want to see, that's probably a video you don't want to watch. Megan, is there anything people can do to help? Like this, I was thinking when we were talking of I met a Kurdish man a month ago at the border, being held by immigration and customs enforcement, but it's not a topic that gets much coverage in the US, and as a result, people both there and people coming here don't get the compassion that, let's say, Ukrainian people who are also fleeing conflict do get, and you can see that in the way that they're literally treated differently in immigration law. So, is there anything people can do to help?
Well, I would say that the first thing is exactly like we're doing now on this discussion, and like you as a listener listening to this conversation are doing by hearing from us and following this issue. Encourage media, research, human rights groups, analysts, and all others who do work in any of these fields to cover this issue in its full political and security context. Look, we can't only talk about North and East Syria when there's a crisis. ISIS did not come out of nowhere in 2014. The Turkish invasion did not come out of nowhere in 2019. And had we as a society, and certainly our institutions, been more informed and more aware of the root conditions causing these outbursts of violence may not have happened. They might have been addressed before they happened. And so what does it mean to build that awareness? That means everything from writing a letter to your local newspaper, to producing a report at your university with input from institutions in Northeast Syria, some of these local media and human rights organizations that we've talked about, to hosting an event for your community group on the state of this broadly defined conflict in Turkey and Iraq and Syria and Kurdistan. between the Turkish state and these Kurdish groups that, in addition to fighting against ISIS, have been struggling for autonomy, self-determination, equality between men and women, equality of people of different religious beliefs, of different ethnic backgrounds, long before ISIS was on the agenda and Northeast Syria was on the agenda. We at the Kurdish Peace Institute are always available to help you do this. You can reach out to us on our contact page. We have information on everything from submitting content of your own to resources for reaching out to us for media appearances. Of course, there's all the sources I mentioned as well. And there are other episodes of this wonderful podcast with very talented expert speakers and interviewers as well who've spoken about issues related to Syria, Turkey, and Kurdistan. You can advocate for greater political support for the autonomous administration, for an end to Turkey's aggressive actions against Northeast Syria and its ongoing human rights violations in the occupied areas of Afrin and Ras Al Ain, and for international political support for a democratic, just, peaceful solution to the Turkish-Kurdish conflict. This is, I think, at the end of the day, the root of all of these problems that we're seeing here. And if this conflict were to be resolved, if Turkey were no longer to take an aggressive militaristic approach to the very concept of Kurdish autonomy, the very social base of Kurdish communities that has the capacity to seek and organize for autonomy itself, this would mean an end to authoritarianism in Turkey, which has been leading Turkey to all sorts of destabilizing behavior and certainly immiserating countless Turkish citizens. This is one of the reasons why not only Kurds, but many Turkish people of all ethnicities as well have been fleeing Turkey to Europe and even to the United States, has been the escalating persecution, poverty, and difficulty of life under Erdogan, which is directly connected to Erdogan's choice in 2015 to end peace talks with the Kurdish movement in order to consolidate his total power over the state using war and far-right nationalism. This would end not only these difficult conditions within Turkey, this persecution, this economic devastation, this oppression of all oppressed segments of society, it would end Turkey's aggressive foreign policy in the region as well, which would be hugely important for allowing Northeast Syria the stability it needs to put ISIS members on trial, hold them accountable for what they've done, begin to rebuild, give post-ISIS communities a future, allow these people who have suffered so much to defeat this group, of course for themselves, but really for all humanity, to be able to build new lives, recover, and have a say in their future. And by doing that, to pursue a political solution to the Syrian conflict. Right now, Northeast Syria is the only major part of Syria outside of government control that has a system that is semi-functional, despite all of the setbacks of the war and the economic crisis, which again could be a whole other episode, which has empowered women, which has empowered different ethnic and religious communities. They could be part of a political solution in Syria. Turkey's war on the Kurdish movement, is preventing that. This goes into a lot of challenges in Iraq as well, with increasing Turkish military operations there related to the conflict that have made life extremely difficult for many different Iraqi communities. But again, all of this conflict, you could argue, is the largest and most impactful, and certainly one of the longest running, for 40 years now, of the modern Middle East. It is an international conflict. The United States, European governments, like we saw with the example of the US and European position on NATO accession and the concessions to Turkey made there, have been very involved in supporting militarily and politically Turkey's efforts to resolve this conflict militarily and to deny the Kurdish people their rights by force. And we, you listening to this, our communities in all of these different countries that have a stake in this conflict, we're the ones who can change that. And you can do that on two different tracks. So one, you can build awareness in your own community. You can build connections between your community, groups and institutions in Northeast Syria, in Turkey, in different places impacted by this conflict, in order to find ways that you can help respond to specific needs, work on specific projects together. And two, in the long run, use those connections, your knowledge you gain from those connections, the resources you create as you reach out to the media, as you meet different people working on this, to reach out to decision makers and show this is an issue that their constituents care about. This is an issue that's not something that governments can do without a response from public opinion. And this is an issue where there is organized pressure to change policy in favor of peace, in favor of stability, in favor of political solutions. Because when we do that, and there's lots of examples of how different communities and organizations have done that, when we do that on a large enough scale, we're not only addressing a humanitarian problem, we're not only contributing to peace and stability in the region, but at the end of the day, we can find solutions for these conflicts that mean that there won't be another rise of ISIS. There won't be another Turkish invasion and occupation of northern Syria. And there will be models for political and social transformation that can help us end conflicts in other parts of the world as well. So there's lots of ways to contribute. I hope you're inspired to do so. And I think that just listening to this conversation, hearing about what's going on and thinking about what you can do, that's already the first step. You're already there. And that's the most important thing.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Megan. That's a really good, I think, place to end because it gives some people something to do. I think far too often, it's really easy in the media to just point at something and say it's bad and then walk away and not sort of leave people a way to help or do something. So I really appreciate you doing that. Is there anywhere people can find you on the internet?
So you can find all of my research and writing at kurdishpeace.org, as well as all of the research and writing of our brilliant contributors, many of whom are on the ground in northern Syria themselves, in other parts of the region, or who have extensively traveled to that region for their work. I encourage you to read all of our content and to follow our social media pages as well at KurdishPeace.org on Twitter. And yes, you can read not only my work, but the work of a lot of other really great people that I'm very lucky to collaborate with.
Amazing. Thanks so much for your time, Megan.
Thank you, James.
Pro drivers live for race day, but for small business owners, every day is race day. That's why going pro with Lenovo Pro matters. One-on-one advice, IT solutions, and customized hardware powered by Intel Core Ultra processors keep your business on the right track. Business goes pro with Lenovo Pro. Sign up for free at lenovo.com/pro.
Lenovo. Support for the show comes from Public, the investing platform for those who take it seriously. On Public, you can build a multi-asset portfolio of stocks, bonds, options, crypto, and now generated assets, which allow you to turn any idea into an investable index with AI. It all starts with your prompt. From renewable energy companies with high free cash flow to semiconductor suppliers growing revenue over 20% year over year, you can literally type any prompt and put the AI to work. It screens thousands of stocks, builds a one-of-a-kind index, and lets you backtest it against the S&P 500. Then you can invest in a few clicks. Generated assets are like ETFs with infinite possibilities, completely customizable and based on your thesis, not someone else's. Go to public.com/podcast and earn an uncapped 1% bonus when you transfer your portfolio. That's public.com/podcast. Paid for by Public Investing. Brokerage services by Open to the Public Investing Inc. Member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services by Public Advisors LLC, SEC registered advisor. Generated assets is an interactive analysis tool. Output is for informational purposes only and is not an investment recommendation or advice. Complete disclosures available at public.com/disclosures.
Time for a sofa upgrade? Introducing Anabay Sofas, where designer style meets budget-friendly prices. Anabay brings you the ultimate in furniture innovation with a modular design that allows you to rearrange your space effortlessly. Perfect for both small and large spaces, Anabay is the only machine-washable sofa inside and out. Say goodbye to stains and messes with liquid and stain-resistant fabrics that make cleaning easy. Liquids simply slide right off. Designed for custom comfort, our high-resilience foam lets you choose between a sink-in feel or a supportive memory foam blend. Plus, our pet-friendly, stain-resistant fabrics ensure your sofa stays beautiful for years. Don't compromise quality for price. Visit WashableSofas.com to upgrade your living space today. Sofas start at just $699 with no-risk returns and a 30-day money-back guarantee. Get up to 60% off, plus free shipping and free returns. Shop now at WashableSofas.com. Offers are subject to change and certain restrictions may apply.
Hi everyone, it's just me, James, today, and I'm joined today by James Cordero and Jacqueline Arellano. They're both from Border Kindness, which is a group that does border aid, chiefly like water drops and support to keep people alive as they're making their journey across the desert here in San Diego. Is that a fair characterization of what you guys do?
Yeah, we do work all across the border in California. Currently, the two of us, we're based out of San Diego. Yeah, but we do most of our water drops in Eastern San Diego County and Imperial County.
Yeah, the organization is based primarily in Mexicali, Baja California, on the Mexico side, and that's where it was founded.
Okay, cool.
In response to the arrival of the migrant caravans in 2018. We've personally been doing drops since 2016, but we brought the program over to Border Kindness a little over a year ago, and we operate programs on both sides of the border. Primarily, James and I are involved with Water Drop, but we also, as an organization, have a school on the Mexico side.
Oh, cool.
We have operated a pro bono clinic on the Mexican side, and currently we're providing direct aid with the families of migrant farm workers in Imperial and Riverside counties.
Nice. Yeah, there's a lot of very important things that don't get enough money or attention. So
Sure.
You said you started about a year ago, but you've been doing the border drops for, what's that, 7? That's a long time. 7 years, yeah, since 2016. And I wonder, like, if we could start by, and we can get into some of the details later, but I've been reporting on the border for that long, and there certainly have been notable changes. And I wonder what changes you've seen. Like, if we go back to like pre-2015, 2016, like that was before the whole wall shenanigans. So like, do you guys want to describe like what changes you've seen in patterns of migration and like, I guess how safe that journey is or isn't, and how that's changed?
Well, as far as patterns, I think it's definitely increased. It's definitely increased by the year. As far as seeing the amounts of supplies being used, the traces of, migrants crossing through in the desert and the mountains, seeing the amount of Border Patrol apprehensions and interactions with people that cross, and the overall militarization of the border.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like one of the biggest changes that we've seen on the border overall, and that has reflected in the water drop as well, is a change in the demographics of people that are coming through. Even as recently as when we started in 2016, there were much more of like the trend that was generally kind of like stereotypically the case of like who was crossing, which was men of Mexican origin of working age crossing to work and send money back to their families.
Yeah.
That's obviously still a large part of who is coming through. But in the most recent 3 to 5 years, especially, the demographics are changing, not just by country of origin to include all over the world and reflecting like this global migration crisis that's going on, but also the reasons and like the desperation is changing. So now it's not just like economic migration. There is asylum seekers, refugees, and it is just changing in tone of like why they're migrating and in what ways they're migrating.
Yeah, definitely. I've noticed that. And like, as the climate continues to change, right, like more and more people come from those countries, I'm sure you've seen that too, that are most heavily impacted by climate change. And and that makes the journey, as it gets hotter and hotter in the desert, like that makes the journey more and more perilous, I guess.
They've come from farther too, and they're the least sometimes like not at all familiar with the weather, with the terrain, what they're up against, with like how you have to move in border towns. If you're not from a border town, you don't really know how to move and who to trust, or more importantly, who not to trust.
Yes. Yeah.
And there's a lot of pitfalls to just arriving at the border, even from like internal migration, like within Mexico, people arrive to the border and don't really know how to operate like the day-to-day there. And it's really made an already incredibly dangerous situation, like just totally perilous.
As more people have migrated from different countries around the world, you're also seeing people who have been on that journey just to get to the United States line for longer amounts of time, that, instead of maybe just weeks, or a month, you're talking about months on months that people have been traveling, by foot, by train, by bus, sometimes by plane, however they can. And we've seen, like invoices for like hotel stays that people traveling from Turkey came and they stayed like in Cancun for like a month. So like, I mean, people are gone from their homelands, longer amounts of time now that, isn't a comfortable thing. So it's not like you can relax and not like you can, rest and, mentally and physically, everything like that. So it's definitely making that part harder for people crossing.
Yeah, for sure. Like I'm seeing more and more migrants from Africa, and like I know they are very much like it's the community for them is hard to find sometimes. Like there are different spaces for them, and like they end up in like distinct spaces from other like migrants who are coming from other areas, and I know it can be very perilous for them. Like you say, just moving around border towns and navigating the pitfalls of that. Yeah, it's becoming like a more and more difficult and I guess kind of complicated issue. But I think what's not particularly complicated is that like no one should have to walk across the desert without water, right? Like it's pretty basic. So maybe we could go through what a water drop is and like what, just if we could walk through like, how far you guys walk, what you're leaving out there, what you find that people take, what you find that they need in their journeys. And you were talking about the receipts. I found tons of those and plane tickets and stuff, like the things that you find that help you understand how better to help people, I guess.
You want to talk about like how far the drops are generally and like all of that?
Yeah. So right now, it just depends on the season, the weather, the length of the drops. We hike, a lot of our drops. We also utilize 4x4s to get us closer to areas to start our hikes, so we don't have to walk even more miles. That helps us out in, being able to carry more supplies, with less walking in some areas. But when it's cooler times and the temperatures are, below 80 degrees, we can hike, anywhere up to, I think the max that we did was like just about 20. But on the average, the cool weather hikes will do, right around 10 miles or so. And then when it gets hot, and the desert gets really hot out there, like over 110 degrees on a constant basis and starting to get over 120 degrees, we can maybe do about 5 miles by foot. We've kind of ran a trial and error this season as far as trying to push further to see how far we can go.
Yeah.
And we attempted 7 miles, and that, I mean, we all were gassed right around the 5 mile mark. So like we have to, set limits, because not only is the distance, but the time spent underneath the sun without shade, and that exposure is, what drives the internal body temperature up and everything like that. And if you don't have a chance to cool down, that's when your body starts to wear out. You get heat exhaustion, and, we want to avoid heat stroke at all costs. And we're trying to, make sure everyone's safety is accounted for. So we have to kind of cap that in the summertime to like 5 miles.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. We have to definitely make pushes in the winter to stockpile the areas that are just simply not accessible in the summer months, and be strategic in like paying attention to what are entry points and can we hit those entry points or exit points. So maybe we can't really access a route throughout its entirety, but we can hit certain points of it more safely as a team during these like incredibly hot months. But we leave supplies of water, food, and protective clothing. And the protective clothing varies depending on season. So, I mean, a lot of people don't really take into consideration how cold it gets in these areas. It gets well below freezing in the winter. Mm-hmm. In the mountains of East San Diego County, it snows. Some drops have gotten snowed out. We haven't been able to complete them because of the snow. And so the protective clothing varies. In the summer, it's things like bandanas, cooling towels, hats, socks we leave throughout the year. People's footwear not being appropriate almost always.
Yeah.
Almost always. Yeah. A blister can be a death sentence out there. So if you get a blister and you're not able to keep up with your group, there's a really good chance that you're going to get left. So something like having dry socks to change into can very well save somebody's life. So we leave socks throughout the year, pop top cans of food, and of course, water.
Yeah, in the wintertime, we leave sweatshirts, beanies, like mittens, gloves, scarves, jackets, sometimes puffy jackets, sometimes blankets, stuff to keep people warm when the temperatures, can be freezing for, most of the day, in those, harsh months of like January and February, where Eastern San Diego County gets the winter storms, the freezing cold, when roads get shut down, we can't even access. So as Jacqueline mentioned, when it is cooler, we try to go as much as we can, as far as we can, to stockpile as much as possible for when the weather prohibits us from doing so otherwise.
Yeah. And just to give people a sense of like the temperature swings, like I've been in the mountains down by the border at like 20 degrees Fahrenheit, which is like minus 10-ish Celsius, I think. Also at 120, which is like almost 50 degrees Celsius. And so they didn't swing that much in one day, but there are days when it's above 40 degrees Celsius and also below freezing in the same day. Like it can be really, it's a perilous place. That's why people don't live there as a rule. Like it's not a place that's kind to people. So I wonder, like a lot of people, I know we did a series on Title 42. We spoke to a lot of people and a lot of people reached out and they want to help. And I understand that the border, I think for a lot of people is like, I think reporting on the border as a rule is not great. Like we tend to see migrants as numbers and not as people a lot when people report on the border, right? And that's kind of, it happens with more liberal outlets as well as more right-wing outlets. But I wonder, like, how people who aren't in town, like if you don't live in the borderlands, right? It's say you live in the middle of America, like how can they help? What can they do to kind of support the process that you're doing, making this horrible thing a little kinder?
We have on all of our social media and as well as on our website, ways that people can help. We have wish lists for items if people want to contribute in that way. And that's literally like contributing the items that we leave. We also have donation links. So if people want to help financially, that goes a huge way in order to facilitate everything that we do. Gas is incredibly expensive. Yeah. The supplies that we don't get donated by a wish list have to be purchased, that sort of thing. So providing material aid is one way of contributing. And then aside from that, I think just following along with this work and sharing it and changing the conversation, because like, as you said, reporting on the border can be really tricky. People tend to not just utilize migrants, but utilize the border as a region in order to have talking points for either like media outlets or political campaigns or that sort of thing. And the border gets treated as sort of like its own foreign area that's not related to either country. Like nobody wants to take responsibility for it. Yeah. And, residents of the United States also are complicit in that. And because they just talk about the border. They don't say like, this is something that's happening in my country. So I think sharing and discussing and becoming informed of what's going on, and also feeling like that kinship and ownership of like, hey, this is happening. I mean, for people, it doesn't have to be as far as like the middle of the country. A lot of people in San Diego don't really engage in work. They don't bother. So. It feels like so far away, even though it's like 20 minutes away. Meanwhile, people are dropping dead so close to where people live. And they choose to turn a blind eye. So I think kind of demystifying that for ourselves and sharing in that, it goes a long way as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's very true. It's always amazing to me, like how like 2018 or the other big one, I guess, would be the end of Title 42, which was this year in May. Like people will become more aware of what's happening and turn up, and like it's so very radicalizing for a lot of people in a positive way. Like it engages them in a way they haven't been engaged before. But it's, I know it's like it shouldn't be like we shouldn't be something we ever get used to. How like cruel our border infrastructure is and what it does for us, but people are just blown away every time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I think you're right. Like witnessing it is very important, even if you can't donate financially or if you can't get down here.
Yeah, definitely just sharing stuff that, if, our organization posts something on social media, I mean, it has to be taken as the truth because we're out there firsthand. We're the ones on the ground seeing, reporting back. And by sharing that, you get people, in different parts of the country or even, different parts of the world seeing like the realities of the US-Mexico border because, most people in the United States don't know if they don't see it, don't live near it.
Yeah.
So that's, something that most people rely on the media and what they see on the nightly news. And, even that, the big media outlets don't take the most realistic or don't share the most realistic parts of the border.
Yeah.
Only to, cater to their sponsors or cater to their crowds. And so a lot of people will get like the headlines, but they don't get the real deal, like, what's going on down the border. And so sharing is a big part of, how the word spreads about the work that we do in other organizations as well.
Yeah, I think that's very, very valid. It was interesting to me recently. I don't know if you guys saw this, but like the floating border barrier in Texas. Like this week, people have been reporting that it has like blades on it, which it does, and that's fucked up. Like they shouldn't. It's horrible. But like it was kind of illustrative that I guess none of the national outlets had someone who'd seen it because the blades have been there for like months when the prototype sat there. They were in the 2020 solicitation to like It just seemed odd to me that someone had to tweet a video for them to like understand because like obviously no one had walked up to it and checked it out, which I don't know. I think it's hard to do border reporting in New York personally, but unless I guess you're interested in the northern border. So I wanted to ask about Title 42 because I think our listeners are pretty well informed on like what that was and what happened before and after that. So did you guys notice when that came into effect? Just to recap, I guess, for people, Title 42 allowed Border Patrol to bounce people straight back south without processing them, and in nearly all cases without hearing their claims for asylum if they had one. And then those people were sometimes laterally translated across the border to a border town where they may not have had contacts or family or any resources. And it often resulted in those people finding themselves in an even more difficult situation than they already were or trying to cross in more difficult and dangerous places to avoid that. So did you guys notice any changes like around, and that came in March of 2020, as soon as they found an excuse in COVID?
Not so much from what we see because we don't come across people too often face to face. We did notice that once the policy was put into place, meaning Title 42, and with the pandemic starting, we did notice a big uptick on the amount of people coming through. We've seen, before that, just a handful of people maybe like that we'd come across. A lot of times those people crossing at nighttime, and it wasn't something that we came across much, but after that went into effect in 2020, we started running into a lot more people. We started seeing people that knew, somewhat of, the policy and that people would try multiple times every day to, cross through. And if they got apprehended and got, taken into Mexico, they try again that same day. And so we noticed a lot more of our supplies being used, a lot more foot traffic, and a lot more, interactions with us. We started seeing a lot more interactions with, Border Patrol and people crossing through. And so when the policy was coming to an end, the only thing that we really saw increase was the amount of people trying to get in before, quote unquote, got closed off, before like the bans would go into effect and, like the no, you can re-enter for a certain amount of years and all that kind of stuff. So like the camps in Hukumba, you see, thousands of people showing up. As that, stopped, as Title 42 stopped, we really can't notice too much yet that less people are crossing through compared to the beginning, the middle of the policy. Our supplies are still being used at a high rate.
Yeah.
Still see a fair amount of traffic come through, these corridors and everything like that. So it's kind of hard on our end, but we also know that people who do cross not at a port of entry by foot, whether it's over a fence, whether it's around a fence, whether it's through the desert, over the hills, we know that people are still being apprehended, processed, and released with their asylum claims. So it's hard, as you know, on the border to know exactly what's going on, because a policy can say one thing.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Exactly. Like the presidential administration can say one thing, the DHS can say one thing, and completely different is happening, right there. I don't know. I mean, I can't really say honestly how much it's changed from our perspective.
I think when these things happen, like, it's always really difficult because like I think the three of us are aware of, there's the things that are put in place and that's how they're going to be applied in theory. And then those of us that have been doing this work can anticipate how it's going to have an impact in practice. So like the things that are occurring now in order to so-called like curb the influx of people, like using an app or like having like bans on certain things, like all of these things, like we know, and we don't have like any faith that they were put in good faith. And we know like that we can anticipate, okay, you're going to be banned if you don't go in through these like really ridiculously inaccessible means. And that word is going to get around, that people are going to freak out. They're not going to bother, and they're going to hit the desert. And that's what we're seeing. Like whether we can actually like attribute it directly to like these policy changes, what I think we can attribute it more directly to is like, one, global migration, regardless of policy, is increasing all over the world. And that desperation doesn't like really wait for any kind of policy change. Two is like the misinformation and sort of like chatter that people are hearing about like this policy is changing. Oh, I heard that like if you don't use this app, they're going to put you in jail. And like just like literally these things that we're hearing on the border, that is funneling people directly into the desert because they want to avoid any kind of interaction with Border Patrol, even if they have like what would be a, like an asylum claim. Mm-hmm. People aren't trusting because there's so much change and uncertainty at like a policy level. There's no accessibility to this information. There's no clarity to this information. Nobody knows what's going on, whether it's people that are working in border aid or people that are seeking asylum. So people are just, taking their chances and hitting the desert. And regardless of the policy change, like ever since the last, like we said, like 3 to 5 years, the increase has been like exponential every single year. It just continues increasing.
One thing I wanted to add in is that so the Title 42 policy was used, in conjunction with the, national emergency, with COVID and all that kind of stuff. With the country, ending the national emergency, they couldn't justify keeping Title 42 in effect. And in a way, I feel that the administration was just playing, political chess and using vulnerable people as pawns. And so the rhetoric coming out and, we're taking a hard stance and this, that, and the other, and a crackdown on immigration. And that I feel was the current presidential administration just trying to appeal to a larger audience for when the election comes up next year. It, can say, hey, look, did this, did that, did this. And the way the numbers have been skewed for apprehensions, that's when you'd have, like, say in San Luis and Yuma, Arizona, you would see, hundreds and thousands of people every day showing up to present themselves for asylum. Those all got recorded as apprehension numbers. So you've got in 1 month, however many, thousands. Now Title 42 ends. Now that number shrinks down. Now that looks better. That looks tougher on, immigration. That looks like you're doing this, that, and the other. Meanwhile, you have people just, being vulnerable, being, in limbo, on the other side of the border, or you have them taking to the mountains and deserts and taking a dangerous trek just so they can be apprehended and, plead their case and try to get asylum and try to get released into the United States. So people that way are being used as pawns in this political theater that we always talk about. Is
always
it doesn't matter the administration, whether it's blue, whether it's red, whether it's orange, whether it's old, whether it's
it's money.
It's all money. And unfortunately, we have to constantly dispel a lot of that false narrative that comes out, and it gets exhausting, but I mean, it's what we have to do because you're not going to find that out any other way.
Yeah, you're really not. I think that's an excellent point. And the point about apprehensions is good, right? They always reported, and I've heard NPR do this, report apprehensions as if they're individuals, which they were not under Title 42. If you cross 5 times in a day and get apprehended and sent back 5 times, that's 5 apprehensions. It's one person. And they were deliberately using that to make this seem like more people were coming. And as you say, now it will seem like less because that doesn't happen anymore. And I think your point about Jacqueline, the points about the misinformation is super crucial, and one that, again, often isn't reported. But I'm not a lawyer and I can't give people legal advice, but constantly when I'm in Tijuana, when I'm in Sonora, when anywhere where I'm on the southern side of the border or on this side of the border, people will ask me, or when the people are trapped in between the 2 fences that constitute the border, people will say, hey, have you heard this? Hey, I got this. And they'll play voice messages on WhatsApp often, or show me a WhatsApp, and we'll go over that's not my understanding, I don't think that's the case. But I understand you're vulnerable, you're scared, and this shit, I have a PhD and speak all those concerned languages, and I don't understand it fully. It's complicated and petrifying if this is your only hope of a dignified life. And I think it's something that people don't understand is how hard it is for those people to get decent information about what they're quote unquote supposed to do. Especially when we have this app, which I don't have a ton of FOIAs in around the app, but I don't think I'll ever get any documents back from the feds, to be honest. But it's atrocious. I think
it's ridiculous.
No,
and then information that people receive isn't even accurate. So whenever there it is that somebody say has come to our office downtown in Mexicali and brought in their paperwork and say I have a court date, there was a time during MPP and all of that, where people were being given court dates on Sundays or being given court dates in Texas when they were sent back after their arrest in Arizona to Mexicali, just crazy stuff. If people are even lucky enough to get somebody to help guide them through the process, it's not even a certainty that the information that they're provided is even going to be accurate on purpose. People are given inaccurate information to wade through this process that doesn't seem to make sense to anyone. it's wildly like convoluted. I mean, that's the intention, right? Like it's not meant to be navigated in any way.
No, it's not. It's meant to put people off, I think. And like even with the work that our friends at Al Otro Lado do and other legal aid groups, like I was speaking to an Ethiopian friend who I met in Tijuana, and he lives in the US and he helps other folks now who arrived more recently. And he was saying that like getting a lawyer to represent you can cost you maybe $5,000, maybe 12. And you might not have the legal right to work, right? So where is that money supposed to come from? And if your language is Oromo or something, it's that much harder to navigate that system, to find useful resources to explain it to you. And it's people like to talk about like how, I don't know, that their family did legal quote unquote migration when there weren't these checks in place and they didn't have to do any of this shit. And I don't know, I don't think people realize how brutalizing the system is until like they've seen it firsthand.
That the cruelty is the point. Like the cruelty and the confusion, the like putting people in danger is the whole point, and it's intentional. Like, so if somebody's there and like you said, like they speak, they're not able to even like wrap their heads around the process, let alone access like the resources in order to navigate that system. Then a coyote approaches them and tells them like, oh, I can take you over here to Romarosa. All you have to do is pay me 300 American instead of 5,000 for this. Like, you're probably not going to win that case. The town's a mile away. And it's a straight shot and you'll get there in half a day. And then you're good to go. And I mean, we've heard the most wild stories, like even from people in the middle of the desert lost, saying they told me it was a 2-mile walk and that they were hiring in the town on the other side of that hill.
Yeah.
Like, and I mean, like, who wouldn't at that point? If like you don't have a country to go back to.
Yeah.
Like it's no longer like, oh, I'm fleeing I'm migrating from my country because there's no work. No, there is no country to speak of, at least not for you.
Right.
And you're here and this coyote presents you this so it's misinformation and exploitation like every single step of the way. And a lot of the time people's most straightforward avenue is through the desert, even though it's like unbelievably hard and very, very often deadly. That's like the surest shot that they have, and they take it because I mean, who wouldn't?
Yeah, no, it's not like, like you say, people aren't like, doing the numbers and thinking they'll make more money in the US. It's like, I will die if I stay at home, or like someone has already killed someone I love and I have to leave now. And especially when like the Trump administration, like at the end, if people aren't aware, like towards the end of the Trump administration, Trump started making claims in presidential debates about the number of miles of wall he had built. That as far as I can work out, he pulled out of his ass. And then they started rushing to build more wall, and I asked them how they came up with that number, and then they just did this thing where they were like, oh well, we repaired this much wall, and there were like 8 miles of border wall prototype, and like, hey, cool, man. Like they didn't build that much wall, but they started skipping the harder parts, right? Like Valley of the Moon, even that boulder pile outside Hukumba. Like there are areas that don't have wall. And those are the areas that are harder, and then that's where people try and cross. And like, I love to go outside. I'm a pretty fit person. Like Valley of the Moon is hard going. Like if you're not going up the road, like that's tough travel, and that's where people don't have a choice but to cross, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's where like in May it was, I think, with the second week of May, when just a few days before Title 42 was ending, that's where thousands of people came through.
Yeah.
Was through that Valley of the Moon area down into the town of Hukumba. And a lot of people, I mean, we're talking about, thousands came through there, and a lot said that they paid upwards to $1,000 a head to coyotes that brought them there and said, hey, when you get down there, you just follow this road. Once you get down to the bottom, there's going to be a bus waiting for you. It'll take you in. And then they got stranded for days after going through that terrain. The temperature, that's when like the season really started shifting. So the nights were really cold. The daytime highs were pretty hot. And I mean, that was the, designed, cruelty.
The invasion that gave the semblance of the invasion that they wanted.
Because you could huddle people together and then claim that you weren't detaining them there, right?
Exactly. They weren't free to leave. They said the Border Patrol told them that they'd arrest them if they left the.
Yeah.
I say camp loosely because it was just like out in an open field with bushes that people, cut down branches and turn into shelters and use areas that they cut down for like campfires at night to stay warm.
Yeah.
And, Border Patrol probably didn't expect that people locally in Hukumba were going to care, or B, that the word would get out. And so their cruel practices that they were enacting on like the first day or two of people showing up and being stranded, no food, no water, then it kind of backfired. And then, I believe you went out there as well. You saw how many people showed up to care. And like we were working around the clock to try to, organize and make food, prepare food, pack, collect donations, everything. And, I've gone through that terrain and, after all that was closed down and looking through as we did like trash cleanups and people, would have their last remaining food and water that you could see like coming through across, the area where they were brought to. And like people shedding clothes because the temperatures were so, warm during the daytime. And then just wondering like, okay, so they shed their clothes and now they're like freezing down at the bottom of the hill and the terrain's too tough to go all the way back up.
Yeah.
And, there's no fence over there. And the fences, we've said have always been kind of built for the most part where people can see them.
Mm-hmm.
So it gives the appearance to the rest of the country that's not out there that there's a fence across the whole border. And, go into a lot of areas where we see that that's not the case. And also we see where border fences stop and migration makes its way right around the edge of that.
Yeah, every time.
But the distance now has increased longer for the walks because instead of just being able to walk through like an open area, now you have to go miles out of the way to get around to an opening in the fence or go up and over a mountain. And, doing that in the summertime, you exhaust yourself from the strenuous hike on top of the unbearable heat. And then you pass away, an eighth of a mile from a fence, as someone that we know that happened to them a couple of years ago. So it's, as you're saying, like the fences and like where they're not put, it's just a point of cruelty and part of the prevention through deterrence policy that's been going on for, almost 30 years now. And
it doesn't work.
Yeah. And the CBP One app and all that kind of stuff, that's just another extension of prevention through deterrence by making it harder for people and pushing people to ways that they can try to get through or, what they think they can try to get through easier. And as Jacqueline said, it's become more and more deadlier. And every year the numbers go up of confirmed deaths, but that doesn't count the amount of people that go missing every year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or the people who like Border Patrol don't find and their numbers are only the people who they found. And that's the areas they're going. Like if people die further north or.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Or the deaths that they deliberately miscategorize as non-migrant deaths. They're just John Doe's, Jane Doe, whatever. They just say like, cause of death unclear or cause of death for exposure, but they don't necessarily call it a migrant death, even though it's someone, traveling with a backpack in the desert.
Just out for a hike.
And
with all
they,
their ID documents.
Can't like say that they were migrating just because they had, a Honduran passport on them. That happens all the time too. So all of this is like, we don't know the scope of their cruelty. Like, it's just what's scary is that like, it's so much bigger than we even know, even like those of us that are like in it every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's no numbers. Like I would, in a sense, love to, in a sense, it'd be horrible. I don't think it should matter. Like, I don't think it should matter how many people, like every single one of those is a tragedy and it's someone's mom or dad or brother or sister. I kind of wanted to maybe talk about like one incident that if you're comfortable doing it, like that you might be familiar with, that I think can give people a sense of how dehumanizing this is and how cruel this is. You guys, I know you're familiar with it, but the young women who died on the Shrine Trail in was it winter of 2020 or winter of 2021?
Yes, that was February 2020.
Yeah, it's right before COVID. So for people who aren't as familiar, I spoke a little bit about it in our series, but can you describe kind of the process that, if you're comfortable? I know it's it's a pretty horrible thing, but can you describe like how they crossed and what happened to them?
I mean, we can give you like some of the background that was like in a newspaper article that we had come to learn.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
We have a type of like direct communication with family.
Yeah.
Right?
You're not in contact. I just I think it would be helpful for people to realize that this is what happened to them, and then also that you guys have been able to respond after that happened to at least try and help deploy kind of resources to make that a bit less of a treacherous crossing.
So as the situation was unfolding, it was nighttime, and there was a freak storm that came through eastern San Diego County around the area of, I think, like Live Oak Springs, Mount Laguna area. And it was just, raining and cold before, but like later on that day, it kind of turned into snow and just turned into heavy winds, like zero visibility, snowstorm. And these three sisters that were from Oaxaca, who've crossed over for work multiple times, came, worked, went back home, for, whatever season, came back, worked, went back home. And it was my understanding that they were trying to save up enough money from what they made here in the United States to open up their own business. And so the day came when they were crossing over. They came through, I think, like in the Campo area, I think it was. And they were led by two brothers that had crossed previously in the same spot and knew the trail of which to go. But I believe it was their first time actually leading people through and not just themselves coming through. So they, they remembered the way, got up close to where the shrine is of the Shrine Trail. There's a little shrine up there that people would, leave little symbols and tokens and little items behind, mostly to the Virgin Guadalupe. And from that point, that's the last time you can be hiking on that trail that far north and turn around and still see Mexico. Anything beyond that, it's kind of like the point of like, you can't see Mexico, like you got to keep moving forward. You've already gone, at this point it's close to 30, I think, air miles. So like, walking miles is a lot more than that.
Yeah.
And they were at this kind of like rock boulder outcropping, just about 5 minutes walk shy of the shrine, when the sisters couldn't keep going anymore. And because of the extreme weather and the extreme cold, they were soaking wet from the rain, and then the sub-freezing temperatures with the snowstorm. They couldn't keep going anymore. And so they were kind of huddled up underneath this boulder. It was the only spot that kind of gave like a little bit of shelter from that storm. Yet, I mean, those rocks are, ice cubes, being out there for that long. So the two brothers, I believe, left to try to get cell phone signal because, you're up pretty high in the mountains. I think that elevation up there on the mountain, I think it's somewhere around 5,000 feet more or less at that location where they passed away. And the brothers that took off to try to get cell phone range to call them, EMS, which turns out to be, Border Patrol in that region. And so got a hold of Border Patrol. Border Patrol arrived to where the brothers were. And first thing, before, rushing to try to make a rescue or anything, they, detained and arrested the brothers for human smuggling, trafficking, just being coyotes. And then they put in efforts of trying to rescue. By the time I believe that they got to the three sisters, two of them had already passed away, and there was one that was still barely alive, unconscious. And due to the weather, as Border Patrol has stated, the agents, the Borstar, rescue agents, the search and trauma rescue, they had to take off. They couldn't airlift the last remaining sister out because there was zero visibility. The helicopter couldn't even find them, couldn't get anywhere close to them, couldn't hover because the wind was blowing so hard. It was just about a whiteout condition. So, I mean, the most, fucked situation possible. And Border Patrol, in order to make sure it didn't turn into from a triple fatality to however many of them there were. I think there was 3 or 4 that were out there. So to in order to save their lives, they took off. They put the last remaining sister in a puffy overall type of situation, and they had taken her wet clothes. They cut her wet clothes off her, and were actively trying to warm her with heat packs and wrapping her. And so they took off and kind of just left her, with basically, as they said, the best chances possible of survival. Even though someone being left on their own in that condition, there's zero chances of survival. Border Patrol took off, allegedly injured themselves, in doing so, got frostbite, etc. I think it was the next day, came back out for what turned out to be the recovery, and all 3 sisters had passed away, from, freezing to death. And so as we learned about that, as the situation was unfolding, we reached out to the journalist who wrote the article in local San Diego Union Tribune. His name's Alex Riggins.
Yeah.
And through, some back and forth contact, he was covering the trial of the 2 brothers that brought the sisters through. They were in court for their deaths, and reached out to see if we could find out any information, if Alex could let us know, maybe where the Shrine Trail was, or maybe where the location of the recovery was, just something that we would have so we can, put it on a map, figure out how to get there, and get boots on the ground to leave supplies, a few times a year, whether it's going to be really hot or really cold. We wanted to make sure that, we responded to the crisis as we found out about it. That's something that we unfortunately have had to do all too common in this work. That's unfortunately the way that we learn.
Yeah. When it's too late sometimes.
Yeah. A lot of we have to learn after it's too late. And that's part of our, expansion of areas that we cover. That's how we learn stuff. And that's how we work at preventing, further suffering and further deaths. So we got more or less a good location, and one of our team members at the time, he went out on a weekday that he had off, and he just went kind of driving around the area and started hiking out in this area that looked like, from the photos that were in the newspaper, could have been this location. And he put in a long hike that day, and he found the clothing that was removed from the last sister. He found the the puffy overalls. He found a bunch of medical equipment, like emergency equipment that was used for the three sisters during that process. And shortly after that, I think it was just like a couple of weeks, we got together some of our strongest hikers, and we decided to go out there and leave a bunch of supplies. And it is a hard hike. Whether you're, carrying 35, 40 pounds on your back, or you're just carrying, a backpack with like a bottle of water and some food, like it's hard no matter what. So we got out there and we left supplies, and we've been going back usually before seasons change, whether it gets hot or it gets cold, and we track to see if anything's been taken. And it doesn't appear that trail gets too much use, but it does get some use.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if the three sisters passing away there had anything to do with like future travel for people on the Shrine Trail or what, but we made that commitment in their honor and to prevent anything like this ever happening again.
Yeah, certainly a very sad situation. And it so many things have to go wrong, and so many people have to turn a blind eye, I guess, for three people to die.
There's blatant negligence on the part of Border Patrol very regularly, given that they are supposedly, like as James mentioned, the emergency medical service that's out there. Yeah. And there is outright blatant deadly discrimination that occurs when it comes to providing emergency services for migrants. In this case, they prioritize apprehension over saving people. Every moment is going to count. And regardless of what the conditions were, those are the conditions, and that's the story that they're reporting. I think we rightfully are skeptical of anything that they say when it comes to rescues and how they prioritize doing so, when we have seen entirely the opposite occur on a regular basis. When they have the opportunity to provide aid, them electing to not do so. Going back to Jacumba, when people were out there and they had nothing, they weren't being provided a sip of water for days and days and days. Border Patrol could have done that. If they are the emergency services, they could have provided emergency aid. When it comes to a rescue like this, they have the agency. They are the agency. They have the agency to deprioritize processing somebody for apprehension and prioritizing rescue, and they chose not to do it. Like time and time again, we see these situations. And I think when, before we started recording, you asked what's the thing that we want to talk about that doesn't often get talked about. And I think it's this. I think it's not just the surveillance and the patrolling and all of that stuff that dehumanizes migrants, but when they're in danger, they're regarded as less than human because the only agency that's out there to help them is the reason that they're in danger in the first place. So we have come across multiple search and rescues that aren't migrant related, just being out in the desert, where either a U.S. citizen or in one instance, a tourist was lost in the desert. And their response is night and day. When there's a migrant that's lost and we are calling for assistance, any kind of, can a search be initiated? can we get, like, the response is so blasé and minimal, and there's no accounting, there's no holding them accountable for acting or failing to act.
Right.
And it's blatant. Like, and I think that's the thing that, like, the general public that isn't involved in this work, like, should know about how cruel it is and how little the response is when somebody is lost, when they're dying, when they're dead. Like, us having to call the coroner repeatedly to have children's bones picked up, that would not happen if that child was not a presumed migrant. So this is like, we have story after story after story of, like, situations like this is just one tragedy, but there is a lot of coulda, shoulda, wouldas, like, on the end of, like, 8 organizations that we carry. And it doesn't seem to ever be, like, a shared weight with any of the agencies that actually have the ability to respond to this kind of thing in, like, an organized way. They don't care. They don't do anything about it.
Yeah. And there's, like, so much money spent on our border, right? Like, I remember in Hukumba, I was, like, sitting underneath this thing for shade. And then I look, I'm like, oh yeah, this thing cost $1 million, right? That little trailer with the solar panels that intercepts the signals. And they didn't give these people a bottle of water. Like all the water came from other people, from random San Diego people who bought it, right? Like, it's just such a strange priority. Well, not strange. It's a cruel and horrible priority choice, right? To prioritize that kind of, like, enforcement over human lives, like, which are being lost. And it's the same, like, you know, I've reported in Arizona a time. I spent a lot of time there. I spent a lot of time here. I've reported in Texas a couple of times. Like, it's the same all across the border, right? The priority is not rescuing people. It's not even particularly enforcing the law as it's written. It's just stopping people coming here.
Selectively, though. Yeah, selectively, because they do let a significant amount of people through. Like, even like in Hukumba, when people that weren't familiar with this whole kind of, like, smoke and mirror show of the border were coming and responding, they were saying, like, well, why are they letting them through? Why is this open over here? Why is, like, the amount of surveillance, you know, we've had people come out on water drops and say, like, oh, should we be hiding the water? Should we be doing this and that? Should we, like, they have eyes on the whole desert. So yeah, I mean, it's, they do, the point is to stop people from coming through, but not completely. Because that's labor that's coming through. You know, that they're selective in how much they, you know, how much the gasket is being opened and shut.
Yeah, and in different sectors at different times, like, it seems like things are done, and even, like, yeah, the other thing I think that people who don't live on the border don't realize is to what degree every single person here, whether they give a shit or not, is surveilled because they live near the border. Like, yeah, but we saw that in 2018 with a lot of friends of mine who can't go to Mexico anymore. Right, who have flagged passports. Yeah, you too. yeah. So many people I know. I don't know how. I went over a ton in that time, but I guess managed to avoid it. But yeah, it's that, and then, like, I have been in the middle of nowhere in the desert and found cameras, surveillance towers, right? Like, stuff that would not be. And the Constitution is largely irrelevant, but, like, there wouldn't be legal or just, like, unjustifiable anywhere else. And, like, this spans from here to, like, our O'odham friends in Arizona to Texas, right? Like, if you live on the border, like, or any within 100 miles of the border, right? The border can come to you. It doesn't matter if you care or not. It doesn't matter if you consider yourself to be like an immigrant to the US, or if you've sort of decided that doesn't apply to you, or you don't care about those people, like, then it doesn't matter. That surveillance still impacts you, and often it impacts, like, our indigenous friends, right? Like my O'odham friends, Kumeyaay friends had their graveyards bulldozed to build the wall, and even if you don't care, even if you think the wall is great, like, your cell phone still go through the Stingray Tower.
I know, it's wild, like, how much people who are, like, very, you know, right wing, anti, like, pro like freedom and all this stuff, like will very readily give up those freedoms in exchange for like constant surveillance. Like if it justifies the means of like, their bigotry or like whatever, like their worldview is, like they're suddenly like very pro border patrol, very pro cop, well, that's like in direct conflict with like everything else that they're saying.
Right.
But
yeah, it's freedom for who, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, it also goes with the same people are saying, well, if you're not breaking the law, then what do you have to worry about?
Yeah.
Well, everything starts at the border. So the surveillance, the facial recognition, the plate scanners, all that stuff started at the border. And now we see that just recently, like the San Diego City Council approved to have the street light cameras and all that kind of stuff, the lamps and all those, hundreds of cameras that are going to be out there, like with that same type of technology. And like, well, if you're not breaking the law, it's like, okay, well, give a little bit of time until you're not breaking the law, and then like stuff still happens. I mean, that's how, things, snowball.
Hey everyone, shortly after we finished talking about why San Diego's lampposts are also spies, my internet once again died. So that's where we're going to end it today. It's already been a long episode. But what I would like you all to know is that you can find Border Kindness online. You can find them on Instagram. You can find James there at Brolo El Cordero. You should probably be able to work out how to spell that. You can find them on Facebook and you can find them on Instagram. And you can pretty much find them anywhere you go on the internet by searching Border Kindness. And like James said, I'm looking at his Instagram profile right now. So it's Brolo El Cordero. I guess BROLOELCORDERO. James has a wish list, an Amazon wish list. So if you're not close to San Diego, then you can just click on there and buy them something. I'm sure you could collect donations and send those as well. So there are a lot of different ways you could help. But I hope you all enjoyed this. If you're in town and you want to help go hike with them, you can reach out to them on social media as well. And I'm sure they'd be happy to hear from you. Thanks so much for listening. Goodbye.
Hey, we'll be back Monday with more episodes every week from now until the heat death of the universe.
It Could Happen Here is a production of Cool Zone Media. For more podcasts from Cool Zone Media, visit our website, coolzonemedia.com, or check us out on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find sources for It Could Happen Here updated monthly at coolzonemedia.com/sources. Thanks for listening.
Pro drivers live for race day, but for small business owners, every day is race day. That's why going pro with Lenovo Pro matters. One-on-one advice, IT solutions, and customized hardware powered by Intel Core Ultra processors keep your business on the right track. Business goes pro with Lenovo Pro. Sign up for free at lenovo.com/pro.
Lenovo. Sink into affordable luxury. Anabay is the only machine-washable sofa, inside and out. With stain-resistant slip covers and a cloud-like frame duvet, everything goes right in the wash. Plus, the modular design lets you change the look of your space anytime. Visit WashableSofas.com to upgrade your home. Shop up to 60% off site-wide, with sofas starting at just $699 and a 30-day money-back guarantee. Shop now at WashableSofas.com. Offers are subject to change, and certain restrictions may apply.
Wasn't that delicious?
So good.
Your bill, ladies.
I got it. No,
I got it.
Seriously, I insist. I insisted first. Oh, don't be silly. You don't be silly.
People with the Wells Fargo Active Cash credit card prefer to pay because they earn unlimited 2% cash rewards on purchases.
Okay, rock, paper, scissors for it. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. No!
The Wells Fargo Active Cash credit card. Visit wellsfargo.com/activecash. Terms apply.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.